Okay, we are now recording. Okay, ladies and gents, boys and girls, this is Prehistory, a traveler's guide. I am your host, Greg Neneman, and with me on the panel today are Christopher Grawl and Sam Eiler. And today, as for our special guest, we have somebody from my neck of the woods, and someone I actually now consider a dear friend, Mr. Lee Hall, the lead fossil preparator at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. So,
Hi.
Lee, welcome to our show, good sir.
Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I've always wanted to have somebody from my neck of the woods on here for once. Well, that's
Your neck of the woods is Cleveland.
Well, I would love to move there someday, but I live all the way in Nikki, Sherwood, Ohio.
Okay.
So it's a 2 hour plus
Ohio.
two and a half hour drive to get there.
Oh, okay.
All right, so
I didn't realize you lived so far away. You always seem to come to the museum for Dinofest things, but I guess it's worth the trip.
Yes, it's worth it. And since I'm now a member, I have actually an incentive to come back more often.
Thanks for being a member.
Yeah.
You know, we're actually just talking about Dinofest for 2017. We've already started laying plans down for the next event.
Oh,
so,
wow.
We might have a couple of changes, not to the overall structure of Dinofest, but in the form of an evening edition. So we'll see how that develops, but that's kind of the plan.
Sir, would you like to guarantee any specifics about what changes that might be in store for Dinofest this year?
Well, nothing's really set in stone right now. We're sort of brainstorming how we can, add a little bit more to Dinofest. I mean, it's a great day with lots of family activities and things. But we think that we might have a couple good ideas for how to extend the day into the evening, we'll say. And probably I can really say at this point because we're still talking about it.
I wouldn't mind there being a little more stuff to do at Dinofest personally. If it goes longer than a day, I'm all for that.
We'll see what happens. We'll see. Me too. I love Dinofest.
I mean, I do a lot. I did a lot to promote last year's Dinofest.
Yeah, I saw you were all over on social media and Facebook. A lot of great photographs. You're always taking great pictures.
Yeah, I thank you. That's what I love doing. It's a good way to showcase people, give people a chance to see the museum if they have, for some reason, are unable to travel that far.
Yeah.
So that's why I take so many photos of not just, of dinosaurs at this museum and other museums that I've been to, but also just animals and zoos in general like that. It gives people a chance to see, them without having to travel too far. Okay, all right. As for
the wonders of the internet.
No. Yes. Both a good and a bad thing, if you ask me. But anyhow, my first question of the day is if you would like to perhaps give us some background on yourself, both from early days in your career, where all you've been, where all you've worked, and how you eventually landed up here in rinky-dink Cleveland, Ohio, in this museum.
Yeah, sure. So let's see. I think I really got my start working around and with paleontologists when I was in high school. I was 16 years old, and I had been living in a small town in South Dakota called Vermilion. And Vermilion is I think it was about 8,000 or 10,000 people. And then there's a school, a university there that had, another 10,000 enrolled students or so. So not a bad-sized little town. And it was Earth Science Week one year, and the university had invited Dr. Jack Horner to visit and give a guest lecture.
Cool.
So I of course, went. I was very excited that, a very well-known paleontologist was coming into the town I lived in. And he gave a really interesting talk, and it sort of centered around his career with digging dinosaurs and, how he basically discovered Maiasaur nesting grounds with his friend Bob Macula, etc. So anyway, the whole point, I got to meet him afterwards, and he signed my book for me, and I did something right because he said, well, you can come out when you turn 16 next year and come out on one of my digs, Montana, okay? And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. So I guess I'd have been 15. Anyway, fast forward to the next year, and I was on my way out there, and I went out, I think at the beginning of August, and the Museum of the Rockies was camped down at the Hell Creek State Park along Fort Peck Lake in sort of northeastern Montana, where there are really, really wonderful thick exposures of the Hell Creek Formation. The museum was in the midst of the beginning of the Hell Creek Project, which was sort of a multifaceted investigation into the Hell Creek Formation, and so I think it yielded quite a bit of research and a few GSA volumes about the paleo environments and all kinds of really great things. So it was really amazing to be 16 years old and just thrust into this environment, because I was the youngest person there. I was all by myself for the first time, and of course I was hanging around with graduate students who were the absolute best mentors to a 16-year-old boy, So we had some fun times and some crazy adventures, and that really got me hooked. Field paleontology. So anyway, I ended up going to school for paleontology, and I have a degree in paleontology from Montana State University. I have a bachelor's of science with a paleontology option, and so it was a really, really great. It was a great program because I learned quite a bit, and the whole time I was going to school, I was still spending my summers with the Museum of the Rockies, and I went from being a 16-year-old volunteer to being their hired field staff. So all throughout, my college and my 20s, I was working with the museum, and I was digging up Triceratops, and T-Rex, and duckbills, and all kinds of cool stuff. And anyway, after I finished school, I had to sort of move on, and go find a job. So I spent about a week looking for a job after graduating. I remember I was out in the middle of nowhere camp in Montana. I was in a barn. We had an internet connection through a satellite we'd set up, and I was on this little laptop looking for jobs in Los Angeles, because I had met the nice lady who would eventually become my wife, and she lived in Los Angeles. I figured, well, maybe they've got paleontology needs out there. And sure enough, California has a booming industry involving paleontological mitigation, which is working with construction companies and salvaging fossils from construction sites and things like that. So I spent 4 years doing that, and after about 3.5 years, a job opening appeared in Cleveland at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. They needed a preparator, someone to wrangle the lab. So I applied for that because we're both originally from sort of the Midwest. Ashley's from Indiana, my wife. I'm from South Dakota, and we thought, well, LA's been great, but we'd like to be a little closer to home. And I got the job, so we moved, and we've been here about 2 years now. And that pretty much brings you up to speed. That's my background.
Oh, pretty cool story. That sounds like a pretty common story among a lot of paleontologists.
Yeah. I've actually fantasized about doing a few of those things back in my teenage years.
Oh yeah? Well, it's never too late. To get those experiences and try new things. I would encourage you to.
Going out at a very early age, taking up dinosaurs, a bit of fantasy of mine.
Cool. So it's a lot of fun, and the field work is very hard work and constant work, and many hours of working throughout the day, and really only stop working, I think, when you go to bed. Because even when you're, sitting back and, relaxing at the end of the day, your mind is still thinking of, did I get everything done that I need before tomorrow? It's a good mix.
Okay, here, Sam wanted to know what your thoughts were on that new theropod species that was just recently discovered in Morocco.
Oh, new. Well, you know what? I haven't had a chance to look at that yet. Maybe you guys can tell me a little bit about it.
Well, the article that I
Felosaurus?
the article that I found mistakenly referred to it as a cousin of T-Rex, even though it's actually an Abelosaurid. I get annoyed when the news does that. They call every theropod a cousin of T-Rex.
Oh, everything. T-Rex is like a standard of measurement in fossil news stories. You know, how many T-Rexes was it, or was it the T-Rex of its own, you know, whatever category? Dunkleosteus is the T-Rex of fish. What do you do?
Well, Rex's only charge is that he's been around for over 100 years. He's had his time to become an indelible part of our popular culture, appearing in just about every major movie you can think of under the sunshine.
Yeah.
You know, from the Lost World to King Kong to eventually Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm. And Toy Story.
Yeah. And of course, Toy Story.
I love T-Rex, but I would like to see more Abelosaurids in dinosaur movies.
Yeah, you have, Disney's Dinosaurs?
Yeah, Carnotaurus.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's about it. Yeah, I think that's a sentiment echoed between a lot of paleontologists and dinosaur lovers, is, you know, the sort of the diversity of dinosaurs is so great, but what you end up seeing in a film doesn't really go where it could. I mean, there's some things out there that are almost, you know, beyond imagination with their weird cranial ornamentations, you know, proportions of their limbs, all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there are other large theropods out there besides just, you know, Tyrannosaurus Rex from other, you know, clades and other families that also could be suitable for Jurassic Park films besides just, you know, Tyrannosaurus all the time.
Yeah.
As I said, I mean, I love T-Rex, but I also feel that the T-Rex has been done to death in the movies. They should throw in some theropods not many people have heard of before.
Yeah, I think that would be fun. You know, I think people would love seeing Ceratosaurus and Allosaurus, more Dilophosaurus, Cryolophosaurus.
But youngest, I'd love to see more of him.
Yeah.
And there are other species of large dromaeosaur besides just, you know, Jurassic Park, you know, freaks. You know, the North American Dakota raptor. That'd be perfect to actually genuinely have in the movie as the big raptor.
Yeah, well, even Utah raptor, you know, finding that the proportions of Utah raptor skeleton are not what your typical dromaeosaur looks like, right? Like, or even your velociraptor.
No, Scott Harmon just released a new skeletal recently, Utah raptor, that really made it a lot buffer, a lot more massive.
Like a rugby player.
Yes, or like a bodybuilder. You know, this was an animal that was built for power and had its own proportions that were not just simply scaled up, you know, Deinonychus or Velociraptor. This was something that was its own body type, its own proportions.
Yeah. It's very similar to saber-toothed cats when you compare them with lions or tigers. You know, how robust they are in their limbs, especially their forelimbs. That means something when you look at these. You look at these animal skeletons and you're trying to, you know, hypothesize about paleobiology and behaviors. You know, those kinds of changes in proportions matter. So, you know, obviously Utah raptor is not going to be employing the same sorts of strategies that Velociraptor would be, you know, both for size and for proportions. So.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Okay, here. I'd just like to start off with some discussion about the fossils that have been found in the Cleveland Shale area. All right, I don't have anything specific in mind. Just what part of the Cleveland Shale would you say has brought up the most amount of fossils, you know, per square foot and all that?
Well, it's actually buried under an interstate now. But there was so a little background for those of you who are not from Cleveland or familiar with this. There's an interstate that cuts through the west side of Cleveland called Interstate 71, and it was plotted out and then built in the late 1960s, I think between 1965 and 1968. So underneath the city of Cleveland beneath the alluvium and the glacial till, there is quite a bit of shale, and it's mostly late Devonian shale. It's the Cleveland member of the Ohio shale, so it's 358 million years old, roughly. So when they were, excavating and all the bulldozers are going through and grading away soil to make basically the foundations for where the interstate would be laid, they impacted these shale units. And fossils have been found in these shale units since like 1867 or 1868. So the Cleveland Shale is fossiliferous, and after 150 or so years of collecting fossils, we have a lot. But it's not something where you can just walk and find a fossil every day you go out. It's a little sporadic, and so the fossils are kind of hard to find. But there's just been so much work done for so long that we just are lucky to have a great collection. This is something that changes when you bring in construction equipment. So the museum at the time, I believe it was the museum director, William Shealy, was aware of fossiliferous nature of the shale, as was David Dunkel and some other people at the museum. So they managed to strike a bargain with the Ohio Department of Transportation and received a grant to basically do mitigation paleontology during this construction project. Long story short, the museum got the money, and so it hired a couple dozen college students, maybe no high school students. I think high school senior college students, and their jobs were to basically follow the bulldozers. And when they dump off a load of shale in a pile, the kids would go and they'd break the rock open and they look for fossils, and they found a lot. They found a lot of material, especially because this excavation was sometimes cutting 30 feet deep into the shale, and when you stretch a 30-foot cutout for 100 feet, that's a massive volume of sediment. So someone said it would be like cutting a new river through the shale down into the like cutting a new river valley down towards the downtown Cleveland area. And so the reason that I'm saying all this to answer your question is because there was actually one particular region of the excavation under Interstate 71 on Cleveland's west side between like 130th to 145th Street, that area, that they called the Mother Lode because they just found so much material. And the sort of the mixed blessing of it as well, they got to go out and collect these fossils, and now everything, all those field areas are buried under the interstate. So as far as a particular stratum, I'm not aware of a particular stratum within the Cleveland Shale that is more fossiliferous, but I do know that it the section that they cut through on that west side strip definitely was fossil rich, surprisingly fossil rich.
That's not all bad here, but I'll get back to this. I'll get back to this further line of questioning here. Chris here had two questions he would like to ask before he has to leave.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll actually just you can give me short answers right here, but how often did you actually work with Jack Horner?
So I was with the Museum of the Rockies for about a decade, and Jack was at a point in his career where he was he'd show up for a couple of days to see how us college kids and his grad students were running things, and then he would go and spend time out prospecting for some new sites or checking out some sites we were working on and looking at the stratigraphy, and he was actually split up between several, sometimes up to like half a dozen research camps in the state of Montana that he was funding. So not only was he hopping around from camp to camp to camp, he was also doing, continuing with whatever research he had going on in Bozeman, and he was also going and giving talks and, trying to do fundraising stuff for the research program there. So, I spent, I worked with Jack quite a bit. I would say I worked for him quite a bit, and he didn't do a whole lot of quarry excavation at that point. That's what we were for. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and my last question that I'll give it to you is that since you actually done some research in end Cretaceous fauna, what kind of specimens did you actually find? Just say say in terms like crocodiles, any other reptiles, birds, mammals, dinosaurs.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So a lot of I think pretty much almost everything that you can find in the Hell Creek, I've seen parts or pieces of, or found parts or pieces of. I mean, I've certainly found a few Triceratops specimens, and I've excavated lots of Triceratops, excavated a number of Tyrannosaur skeletons, and actually, so I found a fossil that I thought was a crocodile jaw way back in like 2009 or 2010, and I collected this croc jaw and packed it away. A few years later, I'm living in Los Angeles, and my friend Denver Fowler calls me, and it turns out that he and Holly Woodward had been looking for some specimens in the collections area, and came across this bag with my crocodile bits in it, but they didn't look to them to be crocodile. So eventually Denver ended up taking a much closer look, and he realized that it was a baby Tyrannosaurus. So that, anyway, we ended up going by Denver, took a crew back and collected more and found more of both lower jaws, dentaries, tooth fragments, parts of the maxilla, and reconstructed. It's the smallest, well, unofficially we say it's the smallest yet discovered Tyrannosaurus Rex skull. It would, the skull was no longer than a tennis shoe, smaller by quite a large margin, smaller than Jane or Nano stuff. So about the size of there's a nice juvenile Tarbosaurus skull out there that's about that.
Okay.
Like 10 or 12 inches long. Anyway.
Yeah. Very well. Thank you for answering my question. So sorry I got to leave this early, but it's nice meeting you, and hopefully we can connect. Yeah. All right. See you later, guys.
Okay.
Take care.
All right. Okay. I actually just come up with a question that followed up from his question about Jack Horner. My question was, what other paleontologists did you collaborate with at earlier points in your earlier career, and which ones today do you still on a recurring basis?
I was really fortunate because the Hell Creek project pulled in a lot of very good research scientists, and so I got to pick their brains. And so I got to know Mark Goodwin, who's at UC Berkeley, and Bill Clemens from UC Berkeley, the mammal paleontologist. I got to know Mary Schweitzer, and Dave Riccio. So Dave Riccio does a lot of stuff on dinosaur reproduction and behavior. Was my advisor throughout my undergraduate degree. A lot of my friends from those times, have now gone on to become research, research assistant professors or paleontologists at a lot of really great institutions, and people like John Scannella and Liz Friedman Fowler, Denver Fowler, obviously Holly Woodward Fowler, Laura Wilson, lots of people. Alida Bayou, Sarah Keenan, these people have all gone and gotten their PhDs, and they all have jobs. I mean, they're just really impressive, hardworking people. And it was really fun, spending the first days of our careers hanging out in the Badlands.
That's pretty cool. And my last one is
you know what?
All right, go ahead.
I'm sorry if I can interrupt. I don't want to forget to mention, so I did spend a little bit of time at the University of South Dakota before I went to Montana. And I worked with a couple of really great paleontologists there. One Dr. Timothy Heaton. He actually had a specialty was like Pleistocene, especially Pleistocene mammal faunas. And so he was doing work in southeast Alaska and the islands there, and was looking into some sea caves that had been tectonically lifted, and so they were no longer in the sea, but they had deposits of fossils and things. So I spent some time working with him, and then there was Gary Johnson, who was I think he was a Permian shark paleontologist. I think it's Permian. I know he was a shark paleontologist. He did a lot of work down in Texas. Anyway, so I just didn't want to forget to mention them if someday this ever gets seen, by either of them, and they go, that Hall kid, I knew he was no good.
Okay, here. This is my last question for visit. Have you ever worked with Dr. Holtz in the past or currently?
You know what? I have never actually worked with Tom because we never overlapped. And he's a really neat guy. And I've certainly had the pleasure of meeting him at conferences, the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology meetings, and he's always been a super friendly guy. He's just one of those people who, if you didn't see him at SVP, you'd think something was wrong. He's a great guy, and obviously he's so well known for his wonderful vests.
We've had the pleasure of interviewing him before.
That's what I understand. Yeah, that must have been a good interview.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
this was the best. This was the best interview we've done on the show yet. Even though we had a lot of audio bugs, this video that's got the most views out of all of our interviews we've done so far.
Oh, good. Congratulations. I'm afraid I don't know if I would draw half as many viewers as Tom Holtz would. But good for you guys for getting some researchers on, and Tom being so nice to do the podcast and everything. It's great.
He was a very, very great guy to have on. And I've actually talked to him about having him possibly coming to Dinofest as a guest, and he said he would love to do it.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, definitely we'll keep Tom in mind then, because, we always have to have new speakers, in the back of our heads. And usually every year that we pick the speakers, I think, well, that's it. I'm out of ideas for who to invite, and then something comes up. It's like, oh, well, of course, there's way more people than we could ever invite, so.
Well, Dr. Holtz, you can throw him in your list of candidates for this year.
Absolutely.
He's a very good one. I've also had two other guests who aren't exactly paleontologists, but they're authors who have written about dinosaurs before on pop culture and all that. They could be very good, make very good speakers on the topic of dinosaur movies and dinosaur pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is author Mark F. Berry, who was our very first guest on the show back last year. He wrote the Dinosaur Filmography.
Really?
It's a book that covers dinosaur movies, almost every one that's ever been made. And he's got an expanded edition coming out sometime this year.
Pardon me, didn't I interview him with you guys, or was that somebody else?
Well, you had questions for him.
Oh.
You had questions for him. That was our last Block Talk episode we did. And there's another person I would actually been interested in having at Dinofest and also on the podcast is his friend Alan Davis, who's a prolific writer in Prehistoric Times magazine. He's written a number of books on dinosaurs and pop culture. He's written one on dinosaur sculpting. He's also involved in the Godzilla community as well. So if you wanted another guy to talk dinosaur pop culture, Alan Davis would be a great guy to have on.
Thanks for the recommendations.
If you wanted someone else, Don Glut is another perfect candidate for this as well.
Yeah, I've seen. Don Glut's written a lot of reference material that's, like just dinosaur day calendar type stuff. Sometimes it's fun to flip those books open on a random day, and just see, what happened June 30th, 1927. Yeah.
Now that we're on the subject, there's a question that I would actually like to ask about that. What are your views on awesome bro culture?
I'm sorry, my views on what culture?
Awesome bro.
What is awesome bro? I'm not familiar.
Well, there's a video that was done on the Thagamizer's YouTube channel that explains this more in detail by Scott Potter. But the basic gist of it is a type of artwork that's very, very prevalent in paleo art. We have overabundance of artwork depicting, dinosaurs, acting more like monsters than regular animals.
And not just artwork, but in pop culture, like movies and games and such.
And documentaries of old.
So is it a style of is it sort of a stylistic name for a style where everything's sort of just like ramped up and super crazy?
Like amped up violence, amped up gore, stuff like that.
I guess when it comes to talking about art in this manner, it's like, well, artists are free to make what they want to make, and I feel like sometimes you can use, it just depends on what sort of the artist is trying to do with the piece, and sometimes when like a paleo artist, has to come up with a concept for whatever new publications coming out they've been hired to do. I don't know. I mean, are people going to want to see two leptoceratopsids like jumping and rolling and fighting and biting? I mean, that sounds kind of cool. So maybe if the specimen you found had like some pathologies in the skeleton and the research is about the fighting, and evidence for interspecific combat, for instance, then the art would reflect that. So I don't know. I think otherwise it's just like everything in doses. Everything shouldn't be just kind of flat and tepid, and everything shouldn't be super gory or all the time.
Yeah,
I guess.
think less Godzilla, think more David Attenborough. That's how I see it.
Well,
yeah. Well, you know what? I do think that it's nice. I really enjoy seeing the paleo art as an environmental restoration, because as a paleontologist, you're trained to, even regardless of what you like or what you work on, your training and your interests are in ecosystems, because you're not just looking at the bones. You're looking at the context from which they were found, and that includes the strata, the sediments, the stratigraphy, and those are the preserved environment. And, obviously anything like invertebrate fossils and plant fossils, all those little bits of evidence come together and they form the overall picture of what's going on. So I've always really appreciated artists who work on incorporating a whole environment. A lot of times you'll see a picture of a dinosaur and it's just the dinosaur standing in a field of white. Maybe a little dirt underneath its feet where it's standing. And those are fine. There's some wonderful artwork, and when you're announcing, a new animal, that's kind of the point. It's kind of the focus. But my preference for paleo artists is even more environmental reconstructions.
Well, I've said this before in other interviews. I've always looked at awesome bro culture as something of a double-edged sword. I mean, on one hand, it's a negative thing because it tends to portray dinosaurs more like monsters rather than actual animals. But then again, on the other hand, it's also a positive thing because it gets people interested in dinosaurs with movies like Jurassic Park and King Kong and Godzilla and things like that. I mean, a lot of people fascinated by dinosaurs probably grew up watching movies like that.
Yeah, and I can understand that. But for every, crazy, awesome bro style paleo art image out there, there's someone else trying to make something based on the latest research, a little more reined in.
Yeah, that's a trend I've been seeing with paleo art lately. They're trying to actively push back against the awesome bro stuff. Try to be more like, show it more of a naturalistic type thing. Try to show dinosaurs doing things that, modern animals often did. Things like that. Trying to shoot more.
I think you could really.
Right, go ahead.
I feel like more than art, if you talk about how the media is presented to the public, especially in the form of documentaries done for home video or television, those really, really need a lot of help
Mm-hmm.
because after Walking with Dinosaurs sort of set this amazing new standard, and it became much less expensive to render, dinosaurs in 3D with computer, generated graphics. It just went crazy, and when you watch stuff on TV, it's just they paid for maybe 8 minutes worth of CG dinosaur stuff, and you feel like that's all you see repeated after every commercial break is the same little snippet of a T-Rex roaring or running, and you only end up with maybe 30% of the documentary being the actual interesting content, and then the rest of it just feels like it's been padded in with a pointless visual. And they do all this because it's cheaper than having to maybe go to a museum and to schedule interviews with professionals and film the specimens in place. So there are still some programs that do that thorough sort of work, which is the stuff that I prefer. But I would say your awesome bro equivalent in the documentary world is stuff like Jurassic Park, things of that nature, because that's just just entertainment. There's no real scientific basis to it. Even though they have paleontologists on there talking, they're presenting them in the context of a make-believe gladiatorial fight. And whereas I prefer stuff like, I think my favorite dinosaur documentary of all time is called Lost Worlds, Vanished Lives by Attenborough. Are you familiar with that one?
I may have heard of it, but I don't know if I've actually watched an episode of it. I've watched a lot of dinosaur documentaries, both past and present, but that one, I'm not sure if I've watched it.
Well, I had to tell you, you're in for a treat. I'm not sure where you can find it now, and I don't know if it's on YouTube or somewhere, but I hope you can track it down, because it is a 3 or 4 part series, I think. Each documentary is like an hour. It was done in the late 80s before Jurassic Park came out, early 90s, but before Jurassic Park came out. And it's sort of like the last, you can think of like the last Virgin documentary in a world before Jurassic Park. Okay, so you get all of this wonderful sort of quaintness and charm that you get with Attenborough, and without the advent of fancy computer graphics, or no one in that case was trying to mimic or emulate Jurassic Park. Okay, so when you watch it, it's just cool because they set up at a lab, and they're maybe at some German paleontologist's lab, and Attenborough's there, and he's like, what have you got here in this little block of shale? And then you show a piece of black shale, and the researcher is this guy, and they have to like dub him because he doesn't speak English. And then you get the gist of what's happening, and he says, you take this block of shale, and it doesn't look like anything, but then he puts it in this little desktop X-ray machine, and then he exposes a film, takes it, and takes it out, clips it up to the light, and there's a beautiful, sea star. And so then you get the point is like, you get to learn how all of these different fossils are studied. There's so many different methods. So they X-ray through shale, or they slice up coal balls, and then they do acetate peels off the coal balls and look at them under the microscope. And so you'll actually get to go to the mine in Pennsylvania where they find the coal balls, in these coal seams, and then they go to the lab and they embed it in resin, and they slice it and they put it in the microscope. So you see the whole process. And at the same time, David Attenborough has such an infectious sense of curiosity. And I'll never forget watching his reaction to when they were on the Jurassic Coast, I think in Dorset, in the UK, and the fossil hunter he's with cracks open a nodule, and there's a beautiful ammonite inside. And you just like, Attenborough's just so genuinely giddy about it. It just kind of comes beaming out of the TV and melts your heart. Icy heart. So it was a really good documentary series. It has just, even after 30 years, it's still just really, really interesting to watch because of how they present the science of paleontology as a process. So even if some of the reconstructions or the graphics or whatever aren't, they're obviously, made with latex and little sets and whatever. They're not going to look as fancy, but that'll be a great documentary to watch for many, many years to come, just because it does such a fine job of taking you through the process of paleontology. And it doesn't matter what we ended up thinking, Dinosaur X looked like with its integument or its posture, because the process of science will always be the same. So it's still really fascinating to watch.
Sounds like a worthwhile show to watch.
Totally recommended.
Yeah, my personal favorite documentary from the 80s was the CBS special Dinosaur that was hosted by Superman actor Christopher Reeve.
I saw that. That's a good one.
I never got to see that, actually.
It's on YouTube, so you can, in full.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, I actually...
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I'll send a link here after the show's over.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually would love to see that. Christopher Reeve was great.
Yeah, this show features very good stop-motion effects from effects animator Phil Tippett. You may have seen snippets of that, possibly, in other documentaries.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there was a companion book, right?
I'm not sure if there ever was one or not.
Sorry, Sam, did I interrupt you?
Oh, no, so sorry. I thought I interrupted you.
Okay, there was also, Phil Tippett's first foray into dinosaurs came from a little short film he did called Prehistoric Beast. Very, very famous short little stop-motion film he did in the 80s.
Is that the one like a Centrosaurus in a big forest by itself?
Yeah, that's the one where it's being stalked by a T-Rex. Yeah, that's the story. It's set in Alberta, Canada, 65 million years ago. The Centrosaurus gets separated from its herd and it's being stalked by a T-Rex.
I don't know if either one of you guys have seen this or not, but there was this educational children's video that I used to love watching about dinosaurs from the UK. It's called Dinosaurs Fun Fact and Fantasy. It has this talk. Throughout the whole show, it has this talking crocodile puppet named Bill.
I've never watched. I never watched it when I was growing up. Nope.
It's actually pretty good. I mean, it's also got a lot of clips in it from old dinosaur movies like Land of Time Forgot and Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth and things like that.
Oh, when dinosaurs ruled the earth. I actually, the museum in Cleveland just had a public showing of When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, that one at the Capitol Theater on West 65th Street. And they did it Mystery Science Theater style. And so they had a Cleveland comedian named Bill Squire and one museum's distance learning and outreach coordinator, Lee Gamble, and then myself, sitting up at the front of the theater in director's chairs with microphones, just yapping our hearts out about the movie and, just poking fun at it. But the funny thing about When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth is that there's only one dinosaur in that whole movie, if you don't count vultures.
Yeah, the Chasmosaurus. Yeah, it's the actual only real dinosaur in the movie.
Is it a Chasmosaurus?
Yeah, it's a Chasmosaurus.
Is it a Pentaceratops?
Yeah, Jim Danforth said it was a Chasmosaurus.
Okay. Yeah, Jim Danforth. I mean, that aside, that is something that people didn't make fun of, like no one was making fun of the stop motion, because I think people have a good understanding of the amount of hard work that goes into animating models like that, and it's quite an art form. So, yeah, Danforth was nominated for an Academy Award for his work in that film.
It did have that made-up dinosaur that looked like the Radosaurus from the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Yeah, it kind of looks like an original, quadruped
theropod or
something.
Yeah. Here's a little fun little story that I found while I was watching Brandon Tenold's review of the movie on YouTube. He had mentioned that the filmmakers originally wanted to include a Tyrannosaurus Rex in the film, But the film's producer
I
did
think I
not
know
allow them to do that. It was because the T-Rex's posture, what the producer claimed, was too close to that of a stereotypical gay person. I swear.
I read that before, but I mean, I don't know how verified that is. But I mean, that's it's something. There's something to be mulled over when somebody omits a dinosaur because it reminds them in their own minds of someone who's gay. You know, because the hands hang down in front of or something. I mean, it's really awful if that's true. But I'm glad we've come such a long ways from, you know, those kind of mindsets having so much influence. We're still working on it, obviously.
Yeah, the person that did it was the head of a Hammer Studios at that time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he was kind of a big homophobe at the time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's also, I also found that in the IMDb trivia page for the film.
Okay.
But I'd definitely like to track down the specific source for the claim, though.
Yeah, that's the problem with the internet. Sometimes when you really want to find a source for something, it's just not to be found.
I think it was in one of Jim Danforth's CD books, possibly. That's where it probably came from.
Well, that'd be cool. Maybe you could track that down and find out if there's anything.
The only problem is the first volume's actually been long out of print.
I thought
you like. Go ahead, Sam.
I thought Victoria Vetri was gorgeous in that film.
I mean, a lot of...
Oh, you mean the heroine?
Yes, Victoria Vetri.
Sana?
Yes,
Sana.
Yeah, Sana was her character's name, but most people just know her as Victoria Vetri, who was a former Playboy playmate also around that time.
And she's currently in prison for the attempted murder of her husband.
Yes, it's been quite a life for Victoria Vetri. I know she had a cameo on Star Trek. I forget which episode.
Oh.
I was doing a little bit of research about the movie before we did the event last week, and I was reading about her. Yeah, she had a little bit of a career after that, but that's too bad that wound up in prison.
You know, whereas Raquel Welch pretty much got to be immortalized forever because of that iconic poster for 1 million years BC.
Oh, yeah. And it's famously shown in Shawshank Redemption.
Yes, it was.
I love that movie, Shawshank Redemption. That's one of my personal favorite films.
Yeah, it's a great film. It is really good. So in 1 million years BC, that was the first Hammer film, right? And then when dinosaurs ruled the earth, was it the third? There was another one in the middle.
Those were the two Hammer dinosaur films. The previous one was done with Ray Harryhausen on the effects.
Yeah, and it wasn't available, so Danforth got it. Yeah, so part of what I was trying to do with the Mystery Science Theater, commentary was to also talk about, what part of what we do these events at the museum is to talk about the science in the movie and to separate fact from fiction. And in a movie like When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, there's only so much you can say about, okay, there's one dinosaur in the movie. Okay, Plesiosaurus is not a dinosaur, and Rhamphorhynchus is not a dinosaur, and why? Other than that, it's just a bunch of, skinny people with bad tans running around basalt deserts. And you're like, oh, look, there's basalt. Those cliffs are representing several different lava flows stratified on one top. So, I did what I could, but I made a lot more humor out of it, I think, than anything seriously discussing science. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the 1950s version of the Lost World, where they took lizards and alligators and just put makeup and fins and crap on them to make them look like dinosaurs?
Yeah. I remember one time I was watching TV and I was younger, and the end of that movie came on, I think, and it's when, like, Professor Challenger, they have an egg, and the egg hatches, and it's literally like just an iguana or like a
gecko.
a horned chameleon,
Yeah,
and
it's a baby
it's
lizard.
got some like frill glued on its head or something, and he's like, "My heavens, a Tyrannosaurus Rex," you know, and a fantastic specimen. I was like, "What? It's a chameleon, man."
In this day and age, I'm pretty sure they'd be arrested for cruelty to animals for doing that.
Oh, you know, who knows what glues they used, but watching when dinosaurs ruled the earth, there's actually a scene where they've taken a monitor lizard and glued a frill to its head and stegosaur plates to its back, and then they face it off with a baby alligator that they've just glued a bunch of spikes to, and the two animals fight each other, and it's not a simulated fight. Like, they actually made those two animals fight and rip and tear, so that, you know, and bleed. It was really like,
Yeah, that was.
it was I mean, there's no way that you get away with like anything like that today.
Yeah.
You know, it's unbelievable when you see that on screen and you think about how people used to do stuff.
Yeah, they could. They actually had wanted to get Ray Harryhausen to do the effects for it, but to cut the cost, they went with actual animals instead of stop motion.
I thought they wanted Willis O'Brien to do it.
O'Brien hadn't passed. O'Brien would have passed away a couple years later, though, in '60, a little after King Conquer's Godzilla was released.
Oh, yeah. I thought I heard something that originally they wanted O'Brien to do it, but I suppose I heard wrong.
It was Harryhausen that they had tried to approach to do the effects for that film. If they had gotten Harryhausen to do it, it would have been a much, much better movie.
I agree.
I mean, did they seriously think audiences would fall for the whole "these are dinosaurs" thing?
I heard on an interview once that when Jack Horner was a kid, he actually had a pet lizard, and he actually tried to do that same thing. He tried horns and fins on it to make it look more like a dinosaur. According to an interview that somebody did with him once, he actually tried to do that as a kid.
And Jack Horner when he was a kid.
That's something that's hard for me to imagine. Jack Horner as a little kid. 'Cause he was always my boss, you know. So that's sort of how I think about him. But it would make sense, seeing as how when he got older, he was busy still trying to turn animals into dinosaurs, albeit birds, and with genes instead of with, you know, glue and model parts or whatever. If that's a true story.
Yeah, the first film to actually do this whole, you know, slurposaur approach, as it's sometimes called, was 1 million BC, all the way back in 1940.
Really?
And 1 million years BC is actually a remake of that movie.
Did they use the same cave language? Do you know?
Yeah,
Yapasha, Akita.
Yeah, something like. I think they kept the language from both movies.
Apparently, Akita can mean anything, since that's pretty much the only word they say throughout the whole film.
Unless you turn on the subtitles, then you'll actually know if they're saying different things or not.
I turned on the subtitles and it was just Akita spelled out.
Yeah, but 1 million BC, being the first film to feature, you know, lizards and alligators with fins glued to their bodies, stock footage from that movie got frequently used in other monster and dinosaur films all throughout the 50s and all throughout the 60s and 70s. And TV shows even used stock footage from it.
Uh-huh.
You know, the only time there was even a somewhat attempt at doing a dinosaur in a film was a very poorly made Tyrannosaur costume in that movie. It was so bad looking they hid the thing mostly in the bushes when it actually attacks the cave people camp.
That, you know, there was this movie I watched once as a kid called The Last Dinosaur.
Yes, it was a collaboration between Rankin Bass and what Japanese studio was that? Was that Toho or is that Tsuburaya Productions?
Tsuburaya, I believe.
Yeah, it was a Rankin Bass Tsuburaya collaboration.
I loved that movie as a kid, and to an extent, I still kind of do, actually.
You know, all I really remember from watching it was that at the end, towards the end of the film, they try to fight off the T-Rex, and they catapult a gigantic boulder at its head.
It bounces off its head.
And the boulder just sinks into the rubber, and you just see this crater form in the rubber, and then it just goes boing and bounces out, and the head flops around. I was so disappointed at 8 years old. I was like, the hell is this?
Yeah.
Classic.
Wrong. And they start little fireworks.
And of course, most people remember this. Most people like this movie because of Richard Boone's over-the-top performance as the hunter thrust.
Yeah. Reminds me of Charles Bronson.
In my opinion, the coolest and yet strangest scene in that whole movie was the part where the T-Rex fights the Triceratops that is apparently buried underneath the mountain. I mean, how did it get buried there? How could it still be alive after being buried there?
They're magic monster dinosaurs or something.
Or just spawn the logic of spawn the tropes of a Godzilla movie. Because some Godzilla roars and other monster roars are recycled for the roar for the T-Rex in this movie.
You know, the thing is, like, we can look back at these movies now and kind of laugh about how silly they look, but, you know, the people making them were really trying. They were like, okay, let's use everything we can to get this movie made. Let's, you know, get it done. And so they left us with this catalog of just, like, amazing, like, classic cinema. And some of it's god-awful, but, you know, I mean, they were really trying, because you couldn't render crap on computers. And not that that's easy work, but they had to build physical sets. They had to physically create everything, and that just gives it's so much different than watching like a modern Sci-Fi Channel, you know, F movie, because they can just you know, save the same wireframe models or whatever. You know, it's just easier to render. But the thing is, like, you can render a dinosaur to run around in your frame, and it still looks like kind of like a crappy video game, you know, because in a way, that's going to sort of, for the following generations, that'll be sort of the same thing for them, I suppose, you know?
And, you know, the Sci-Fi Channel and Asylum, you know, dinosaur movies they've just got such god-awful effects. I actually have said on more than one occasion that the best stop motion is infinitely superior to the worst CGI of any movie that I have personally watched, you know, in this present day and age.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and some of the best stop motion is, I mean, it's so fun to watch, knowing that every piece of that moving creature was manipulated intentionally by a hand. You know, there's just something about that that's really, really neat. Even if you're watching, you're like, well, clearly that's made out of clay and plasticine or whatever. But it makes it fun. It's part of the charm, right?
Yeah.
Also, what do you think of the Carnosaur films? That movie by Roger Corman?
Oh, yeah. I kind of vaguely remember the Carnosaur movies, but I know they were a good deal more gory and violent than something like even Jurassic Park or Jurassic World.
Yeah, absolutely. It was
like murder dinosaurs getting out there.
Yeah, yes, it was great. It was an R-rated alternative to Jurassic Park. The movies were intended to be a cash-in on Jurassic Park, but the actual novel the first one was based on came out before Michael Crichton wrote Jurassic Park. So, yeah. Okay.
I think I lost Sam's audio.
The effects.
No, for Carnosaur, the effects were done with crudely made animatronics and crude puppets and suits.
Mm-hmm. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Sam.
Yeah, some of the effects in those Carnosaur movies are just plain laughable.
They're awful.
But I mean, aren't they the same as the effects, used in the original Godzilla film?
Because they're not even that good, actually. Not even good, because the people that did the Toho Godzilla films, those were professionals.
Well, yeah, but I mean, weren't the people in Carnosaur professionals too? Like Godzilla at one point is like a puppet head over a mountain, and Carnosaur at one point is a puppet head. You know?
For the Godzilla films, they just did whatever they needed for particular scenes in the movie. Because the first suits, they were heavy. The first suit weighed like over 150, 200, maybe 300 pounds.
Holy crap.
It was heavy. The suit actor, Haru Nakajima, I think he passed out in the suit during filming at one point. It was so awful, so heavy, hard to breathe.
Holy crap.
And he lost a lot. He lost quite a bit amount of weight in just pure sweat, even, too. They got better. They got better. With every new movie, and with each new suit that they used, they improved upon it with each movie. Making it lighter, making it fit the actor so it could allow for more detailed for choreography when they started having monster fights in all the movies.
Something else that I noticed
Okay, we lost your audio again, Sam.
about the first Carnosaur film is that it was actually... Can you hear me? Guys, can you hear me?
Now...
Yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me? All right, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Okay, as I was about to say, one of the things that I noticed about the first Carnosaur film is that it took a lot of elements from the Alien film with Sigourney Weaver in it. Guys, can you hear me?
Yeah. All right. What he was mentioning was how the first Carnosaur film took some elements from the Alien film series.
Oh, it's got some of the horror element and the Carnosaur stalking around as it grows.
Yeah. Well, there's multiple dinosaurs. There's a Deinonychus that's killing most of the people in the film. There's also a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
And how the dinosaurs are kind of bursting out of human beings like the aliens.
Because it's a virus. It's part of a virus created by a mad scientist played by Diane Ladd, who's the mother of Laura Dern from Jurassic Park.
Okay.
Yeah, her character creates a virus that causes humans to give birth to dinosaurs, chest burster style.
That is inventive.
And that was not in the original novel to the movie, though. That's almost a completely different story, and of actually a large cast of animals in it, not just one dinosaur, but other dinosaurs, including a plesiosaur.
Really? The marine reptiles don't get enough love.
Yeah, the plesiosaur in the novel gets to actually kill a decent amount of people in there, and there's actually a scene where the British military has to confront the dinosaurs out in the countryside.
Really?
Yeah. The story takes place in the United Kingdom, and it follows a journalist as the protagonist of the story here. And you have a husband and wife pair of antagonists, the Penwords. Diane Ladd's character in the novel is a lot younger, a lot more attractive, and actually has a sexual relationship with the lead character in the book. And he uses this to get access to the little private zoo where the dinosaurs are on display.
Oh, okay.
And this is after one of the Deinonychus has broken loose and has started killing people. And the big theropod of the book is a Tarbosaurus.
Oh, really?
And there's also a sexually frustrated Megalosaurus.
Sexually frustrated Megalosaurus?
a Megalosaurus, it was a male, and it wants to mate, but being that no females were cloned, it's much, much more aggressive than usual.
So basically it kills people because it's horny, basically?
It doesn't get
No, that was a joke, Greg.
Yeah, I know that.
No, that was just me being nutty.
And the only time there's actually a Tyrannosaurus Rex in the book is a pair of young Tyrannosaurus chicks at the end of the book. Where they feed on in the end of the book. It's a straight up B movie in the novel, but it's a lot better than the movie.
Yeah. One of my favorite dinosaur B movies is Triassic Attack.
Triassic Attack.
I think
that's a more recent movie.
Yeah, probably like mid mid-early 2000s, you know?
Yeah,
2005 or 6.
it's relatively recent. It's not, it's got CG dinosaurs in it, of course.
Yeah. And in that movie, through some ridiculous plot devices, three fossil skeletons are like reanimated. So there's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, a Dromaeosaur Velociraptor thing, and a big pterosaur. And the skeletons come to life, and then they take off through this community, and they start wreaking havoc. And I think my favorite scene from the movie is when a bunch of college kids are down by the lake or the quarry, you know, going swimming, hanging out at the beach, jumping off boulders, and suddenly this Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton comes tearing out into the party, just shows up, and everyone screams, ah, and runs away. And there's one guy who's got his headphones on, and he's not paying attention, so everyone leaves, and then, like, he's like, where is everyone? And he looks up, and this T-Rex skeleton, like, chomp, right? And it grabs him, and it swallows him, and he falls out of the skull onto the ground, and it walks away. He's, like, totally unharmed.
That's like it's spoofed in, you know, classic dinosaur movies where a similar scene takes place.
Yeah, absolutely.
It kind of sounds a little bit like a dinosaur zombie film. It's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah. There's some sort of magic spell or something.
Magic.
Skeletons to
Well, if you
reanimate.
you want legitimate zombified dinosaurs, there's a series of novels called Jurassic Dead that actually has legitimate zombified dinosaurs and prehistoric virus.
Sounds terrifying.
Yeah. I've read the first book, and it's actually very, very cool. Very good book.
This is just my opinion, but in my opinion, the worst dinosaur movie ever made has got to be Dino Croc. It's the crappiest dinosaur movie I've ever seen.
I haven't even seen that one. That's another Sci-Fi Channel special?
Yep, it was a Sci-Fi Channel film. They cloned a creature that's like a cross between a Suchomimus and a Sarcosuchus.
Okay.
Something like that. And it's
Yeah.
notable for a scene where a child actually gets decapitated by the titular monster. I mean, not many.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not many movies have the guts to kill a kid openly
No,
in such
absolutely.
violent fashion either.
Yeah.
I mean, that scene actually the death scene was trimmed down a little bit when it was first broadcast on TV because of that scene.
Well, I don't know if any of you guys have seen this movie, but there was this other movie that Sci-Fi did once called Dino Wolf, which is basically a prehistoric werewolf movie. It's where this scientist mixes dire wolf DNA with human DNA, creating a human-wolf hybrid that looks... The best way I can describe it is it's basically a prehistoric werewolf kind of thing, created through genetic engineering.
I don't think I've seen this.
Yeah.
This is just me coming off of watching several bad monster movies on Amazon Prime recently.
Yeah, it's supposed to be part human, part dire wolf.
I mean, that's actually not a pretty... It's actually a sign of a twist on your usual lycanthropic thing of... Okay, Sam, you want to get back to the more scientific... All right, go ahead, Lee.
Oh, no, that's fine. I was mentioning real quick that there's a Mystery Science Theater episode about a movie where these archaeologists are excavating a site and they find a werewolf skeleton, and they get in a fight. You know what I'm talking about? They get into a fight.
Yeah.
One of them falls on the teeth, and so he's like, "Oh, I got bit."
And he starts changing into a wolf man.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a god awful movie. Sam sent me a snippet of the movie. Actually, I think this was on MS3K. It was put on there very quickly, actually.
And they take the skeleton to what looks a lot like the Page Museum in California, the La Brea
That's
Park.
right. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, they do. They go to the Page to film some of the shots. Yep.
And there's this scene in the movie where a woman falls down, and she's trying to get away from the werewolf, but the werewolf is taking its little sweet little time, catching up to her. It's like, oh golly, that's. Oh.
It looks like the werewolf's not even really trying to kill her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not one of my favorite horror movies. Okay. Sam's other question here was Jack Horner an idol of yours, or were there other paleontologists that you looked up to in your earlier years?
When I was young, yeah, I mean, I had dinosaur books by Jack, and I had Robert Bacher's book, The Dinosaur Heresies. So I actually remember I read the book Raptor Red when I was in 7th grade, Robert Bacher's fictional novel about the life of a Utah raptor. And that book for me was so awesome. I thought it was so cool, and the environments he described to me, just everything was brought to life so clearly. And when I went to meet Jack Horner the first time, when I was 15, he asked me, because I had a copy of his book there, and he's like, "So what's your favorite dinosaur book?" So he's like standing on the stage, kind of leaning over, peering down at me, and he's like, "Oh, what's your favorite dinosaur book?" And I was like, "Oh, Raptor Red." He just kind of like caught him off guard. And he goes, "You know, it's fiction, right?" Like, yeah. So, yeah, I would say there was actually this really awesome book. I think probably my favorite dinosaur book from growing up was called Hunting Dinosaurs by Luis Cebollos. Naturally, he was the writer. Who was the photographer? Was Luis Cebollos the photographer, and John Neighbor something was the author? Might have it flipped around. I'm not sure. But in any case, that book, Hunting Dinosaurs, was awesome because it showed so many different people working. I remember thinking the stories of Vin Santucci, the National Park Service ranger, who I think was at Petrified Forest for a while. I thought that was so cool because he was a park ranger, but he was a paleontologist, and so I didn't know that you could, do something other than work in a museum and be a paleontologist, which is totally true. People like Karen Chin, who are the other people featured in that book? I think Johnson may have been in there, Hans Larson, Bill Curry, yeah, pretty much anyone in that book I just really enjoyed. Oh, yeah, Paul Sereno was in there. Lots of people. Just Jim Kirkland, yeah. And then, going to conferences when I later on do that, I would say, oh my God, that's so-and-so from, I'd always think of their picture from that book because they were so good. So yeah, there were a few people who I just idolized anyone who was a paleontologist, and I saw the picture in the book and I was like, wow, I want to be like them, and it just so happened that one of the first paleontologists I got to meet was Jack, and he was like, well, take a chance on this Lakey kid.
Yeah, okay. Anyhow, I was going to ask, also in your early years, were there any paleo artists that you particularly admired while you were growing up also?
Yeah, I liked Robert Bacher's artwork and the Dinosaur Heresies, and a lot of the artists from the late 20th century, or the 90s, in other words. Brian Franksack, I think, and who else? Well, Mark Hallett. Oh my gosh, so many names that I'm blanking on right now.
Yeah.
Who are some other paleo artists?
Douglas Henderson.
Oh my God, Doug Henderson's art is my favorite paleo art, hands down. And that is not to say, because I there's so much good art, but my personal favorite, and I think a lot of even paleo artists would agree with me, Doug Henderson's art is just phenomenal. That man can pull a mossy limestone cliff out of a piece of blank stock paper, just with, it seems just like a couple of scribbles of his pencil, and his gnarly fallen trees. Everything in his drawings, his art has such weight to it, even if he's using very light pencil strokes or ink washes or something, because he just has the knack for suggesting lighting and texture that just puts something on the page and just demands that you look at it, and it like pulls you in. And you'll notice that he's never really done dinosaurs that are super like Louis Ray would be like the opposite end, because his stuff is very colorful and vibrant, whereas Doug Henderson's, even his colorful dinosaurs were fairly subdued, and it always seemed like there was some kind of a humid, like a mist going on. Doug Henderson. Wow.
Yeah, Doug. Yeah,
If I
Doug.
had to name my personal favorite, it would be Todd Marshall. I love his work.
Yeah,
I like Julius Chutenier.
yeah, that you got it right the first time.
Yep. His art is obviously, he's everywhere now. Danielle Defoe up at the Royal Ontario Museum does some amazing artwork as well.
Her work is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. Yep. And they're both super nice people too. They're all very nice.
Yeah, I first got exposed to Danielle's work on her work hosting the Animal Logic series on YouTube.
Yeah, Danielle has done really well for herself, and I think that's a really great little series she's been working on. She's somebody we'd like to try and get to Dinofest sometime.
Yeah, she actually told me last year that she was planning on attending Dinofest last year as a guest, but she had some issues come up, so she was unable to make it.
Yeah. We had Julius who was able to come.
Yep.
We'd still like to get Danielle down, because
Yeah.
she's such a great lady.
Yep. She has told me that she does have plans to attend Dinofest this year.
Okay.
Even if it's just as a visitor. And even if you want to get her as a speaker, that's more power to you if you want her as a speaker in addition to being a guest.
Guys, I'm going to just open up my blinds here because I realize how dark it's gotten.
Oh, that's okay.
Just getting deeper and deeper into shadows, and my webcam can't seem to handle the dark a little better.
Yeah, another very gifted female artist that I'm a real big fan of is Emily Willoughby.
Yeah, Emily Willoughby, and did she do Yichi?
Yeah, she did that, along with a whole host of other dinosaurs, primarily dromaeosaurs.
Wonderful, the feathers and the details.
Yeah,
Emily's excellent too. We're just spoiled because now the internet has made it possible for us to see, paleo art finished an hour ago by someone in Poland or, Japan or wherever.
Yeah, Japan. I'm actually friends with a guy from Japan who's a big mammal artist on DeviantArt named Jaguar. His actual name is Shuhei Tamura.
Oh, cool.
And there's also another guy that's in Iran named Leogon, also a very gifted paleo-mammal artist. And on the very first episode of the podcast, he did a commissioned artwork for us depicting a matchup between the American lion and a Smilodon populator.
Oh, cool.
So that was a very awesome, cool thing he did for us. Very cool thing.
It is.
And I consider them just about as good in mammals as the guy who did the illustration on this book, Mauricio Anton.
Oh, yeah. Those drawings, all his anatomical breakdowns and things he has.
Yeah, if I had to pick one guy to see my favorite mammal artist, Mauricio is number one on my list, hands down.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with reconstructions of prehistoric cats.
Yeah. It is hard to do.
So I greatly admire Louis Ray's work.
His work is really, I think it's like the most liberal paleo art out there, because he really isn't shy, which I think it's good too. Like he does all kinds of wonderfully crazy colors combinations, and some people maybe that's not in their taste, but so many dinosaurs are just shown as a drab gray, green, or brown, or dirty yellow, earthy colors. So it's good to see that some real bright colors are out there as well, especially since, dinosaur integument would have involved a lot of keratin, whether it's on the little horns on the head, the frills, the shields, the spikes, whatever, they all had keratin on them, and keratin can be any number of colors if you just look at modern birds, right, and different reptiles and things. So, yeah, and it's interesting because there's there was some work done at, it was presented on an SPP last year, and I'm blanking on the person who is looking at this stuff, but the supratemporal fenestra at the top of the head, people always say, oh, maybe muscles went in there or something, and anyway, the take-home message is that no, and in fact, it may have been, full of a bunch of vascular tissue, and then above it, it may have correlated with something like an erectile tissue, which could have been flushed with blood and colorized, something like a turkey waddle or a coxcomb. So, Louis Ray has done some very interesting restorations showing like these fleshy lumps or things coming off the heads of dinosaurs. They may seem silly, but it turns out that it may not be too far from the truth.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of reconstructions recently of tyrannosaurs having gular sacs on their throats.
That'd be something.
I think it's based I think that's actually based in part on a specimen of Tarbosaurus that was found not that long ago that may have been preserved well enough to actually show evidence of a gular sac on its throat.
I actually, I have a piece here of one of Charles R. Knight's illustrations of an Apatosaurus, or as it was known as at the time, Brontosaurus.
The iconic Charles Knight, Brontosaurus in the swamp.
Maybe one of the, that's one of the most famous dinosaur paintings, right, of all time.
Yeah, that and
his
T-Rex and Triceratops.
T-Rex and Triceratops, yeah.
I've actually seen that the latter in person at the Field Museum last year.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's so great that they have preserved those murals for so long, because there are people every year who learn about Charles Knight's art, and, sure, someone every day goes to that museum and just appreciates that artwork.
Yeah, Knight was the major inspiration for how dinosaurs were depicted in our movies for well over a century.
Absolutely, and we actually had a little story about that. So at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, we have a large fiberglass stegosaur model out front, nicknamed Steggy. Technically, this is Steggy 2. This is the original Steggy aged, and we got a replacement. And the original ended up somewhere in Rhode Island or something. So Steggy is actually based off of the original molds for the World's Fair dinosaurs, for the New York World's Fair in the 1960s. And there were a number of life-size or scale dinosaurs that were produced. And I forget the artist's name. You'll notice a trend with me in names, but several. There was a Brontosaurus and Trachodon and Tyrannosaurus Rex and I think Dimetrodon and Stegosaurus. Life-size models of these animals were floated down the Hudson River to the site of the World's Fair, where they were all uploaded from barges, and then they were part of the Sinclair Oil Dino Land. And they had these really cool machines where you could basically make your own little plastic dinosaur. You pull the lever, you chose a color of plastic, and it did like a hot mold injection plastic toy. And they still have one of those machines working at the Field Museum. So it's a really interesting history that you could talk about forever and ever. But the colors painted on these animals were all very early Charles Knight colors, like green and maybe like a green and cream or green and brown. And our Stegosaurus was green and brown. And if you look at images of Stegosaurus, if you just Google Stegosaurus and look at the images, you will see that 99% of all the Stegosaurs on there, whether they're paintings or toys or what have you, are going to be green, and they're going to have brown plates, or they're going to be brown, and they'll have green plates. And then there'll be a couple that are crazy silly colors, but it's really surprising because Charles Knight's first edition of Stegosaurus was a green scaled body and brown plates that kind of look like planks of wood. And that has stuck around for over 100 years. So the challenge was our stegosaur model, where it was painted green with like brown plates, and it was time for a new paint job and a little bit of repair work. So they got a hold of us in vertebrate paleontology, and they said, well, what colors, do you want to paint it? Do you want to change the colors in Steggy? And my boss, Dr. Michael Lyon, he was out doing some research abroad. So it ended up sort of falling onto self and our exhibits team to choose a color. And I told them that, well, stegosaur plates were covered in keratin, and you have to look at these structures now as not like armor plating really, but as, communication appendages. So they're billboards or they're signs, they're attention grabbers and communicators. And because they were covered in keratin, there's no reason for them to just be brown like tree wood. And so through compromise, we essentially ended up with our current color scheme, which is like a brick red and body with a little bit of a creamy undertone, and then sort of like a off sort of pale eggshell color for the plates almost. It looked darker on the computer screen than how it ended up, because it ended up looking a little bit more like freshly laid skin. It's like it's quite pink or coral almost. But in any case, that's why we have a big, red stegosaur now, is because we were trying to represent sort of the thinking that dinosaurs would have been like that, were probably colorful, because they have attention-grabbing appendages. And, some people were happy, some people were like, why is it pink? So you can please some of the people some of the time, you can't please all the people all the time.
Yeah, I see that in the comment sections of certain pieces of paleo art on both Facebook and on DeviantArt. Sometimes it can get really nasty sometimes, depending on what's being depicted.
Oh yeah, everyone's got an opinion about something.
Well, if it's a fight between animals that never coexisted, then it can get really nasty sometimes, especially if it's T-Rex and Spinosaurus. That one really kicks up a hornet's nest.
Oh man.
Ever since,
yeah, I don't know.
If
I remember when...
Alright, go ahead.
You go ahead, Greg. You have another question?
Oh, okay. It just said, it's only because of Jurassic Park 3 that this whole T-Rex Spinosaurus, feud is even a thing. I mean, prior to that movie, it was never even really brought up, I don't think.
That's totally true.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of people, they made a joke, there was a scene in Jurassic World when Rexy's breaking through that one building and knocks down the Spinosaurus skeleton. That's kind of like a little payback for what happened in JP3.
Oh, absolutely. That is absolutely what that was. I mean, it's like, come on. It couldn't be anything else.
Okay, now on paleo art, is there any specific paleo art composition that you have a particular favorite of from any artist?
Oh, yeah. Doug Henderson has a few. I love the bloated centrosaur floating out into like an estuary with the plesiosaur swimming underneath it. And I really like I think it's a Postosuchus and an Aedosaur, and the Postosuchus is like tossed the Aedosaur up into the air because it grabbed it and was hunting it, and it's just this beautiful little snapshot where the Aedosaur is just like, oh my God, what's happening? And the Postosuchus is just with the tent cocked over its shoulder, and it's very nicely set into the forestry. And I also really like the I think it's a Skrepnik piece, and it was the cover for a book about the Dinosaur Provincial Park in Alberta Paleontology that has the centrosaur herds drowning in a flash flood, and as you move across the image, it transitions into buried carcasses to fossils to a paleontologist finding the bone bed in the Badlands.
Yeah, for me, my little pet favorite of mine for Douglas Henderson is his depiction of Dinosuchus lying await as there's a herd of hadrosaurs going through a forest.
Cool.
That one's quite okay here. I like this. All right, go ahead, Sam.
Pardon me, how much more time do we got left?
Well,
Sorry.
Okay, we got plenty here. I was actually looking to see if we could start talking about, your job as a preparator. I was looking to see what you could tell us about how that goes.
Yeah, no problem. And so I've been a preparator with the museum here in Cleveland for just coming up on year 2 ending, and it's been a really, really fun and exciting 2 years. So I wasn't a preparator as an official preparator before coming to Cleveland. My preparation work had been done, volunteering at the Museum of the Rockies, or I was actually a research assistant for David Verricchio for several years, and so I did preparation on specimens for him down in the Earth Science Lab. And then when I was in California for 4 years as a mitigation paleontologist, I actually wore a whole bunch of different hats. Everything from, field work and excavation monitoring up to project management stuff. And I was also I was in charge of our little fossil and archaeology lab in Pasadena, the paleontology specimens. So there was a lot of archaeology there, much more archaeology stuff happening in that lab than paleontology, because of the nature of some of the projects. And so I would do prep work on stuff we excavated. Our crew found a Pleistocene desert tortoise, the genus Gopherus, in its burrow in place. So they, retrieved the fossil from the burrow, and then I prepared what was left of the shell, and essentially, over time, the top of the shell sort of collapsed in itself, but there was still vertebrae and limb bone elements inside the shell. It was really cool. So, but I was, like I said, also writing up project reports. I wrote thousands and thousands of pages of project reports up, and photographing things, and going out of the field, and doing background research, and contacting museums, and going to meetings with clients, and all kinds of stuff. Kept me busy, exhausted, but busy. So coming to Cleveland as a preparator, I enjoy it because my time is devoted to, basically cleaning fossils up. And we have a pretty good arrangement of projects going at the museum right now. Most of what we're working on is dinosaur material from 75 million years ago. It's late Cretaceous from the Oldman Formation in southern Alberta, Canada. If you cross the border into Montana, those same rocks are called the Judith River Formation. And you're looking at like 75 to 80-ish million years old. And so it's, you're 10 million years older than the Hell Creek Formation. And we have a lot of centrosaur and horned dinosaur material from bone beds, and just found isolated because my boss, Michael Ryan, who is our curator, he has he's spent many years doing research on horned dinosaur evolution. So Michael, along with many of his colleagues, including David Evans up at the Royal Ontario Museum, Wendy Sloboda, and Corwin Sullivan, and many other researchers who they've worked with over the years, have really opened up quite a window into the Cretaceous in this pocket of badlands in southern Alberta. So my volunteer preparers, I have them work on centrosaur material, because that's a lot of what we have from bone beds, and we have everything in there from rib bones, hip bones, and toe bones, and disarticulated skull elements. So one person could be working on the front of a rostral or a beak, and another person's putting together a metatarsal, and another person's cleaning off a vertebrae. We also have specimens collected locally in northeast Ohio representing the Cleveland shell fauna, which is Flaminian, right, end of the Devonian, 358 million years or so. And that is a little bit more labor-intensive preparation than a lot of our dinosaur material, because the shale is very hard. And we have, right now, the capacity to basically work on one project in the Cleveland shale at a time. We have a large backlog of material still waiting to be prepared that was collected during Interstate 71 salvage operations. So even after 50 years, we have a few hundred blocks of shale that need to be prepped. So the plan is to pick that up once the museum goes through sort of the final phases of its renovations, and we'll have a new paleontology lab. It's really a shared science lab. So you can, anytime you go to the museum, you'll be able to see paleontologists working on fossils. and you'll also be able to see mineralogists and other things happening. In any case, I'm working on a project right now that's really cool. My personal alpha project, I'll call it, is a Centrosaurus, or a Centrosaur, I should say. It's a baby, and it was only a couple of years old when it died. So the skeleton would fit on your coffee table, and I have been working away at that for the last year and a half, and really hitting it pretty hard lately, trying to pull out the limb bones and get the tail all sorted out. So it's really quite enjoyable. Now, as far as what you want to know about preparation and how that works, I mean, you may have to ask me, because I could just talk about different things we do.
I mean, what's been the most challenging specimen for you to work on in your career as a preparator?
Oh, the baby ceratopsian, without a doubt. And I'll tell you why. Because one is because I inherited the project when I started at the Museum of Natural History a couple of years ago. It had been started by a previous preparator who's no longer with the museum. So I had to inherit the project, and then I had to try and make a mental map and sort out like where they were and what they were doing at the time, when preparation stopped, and then I took it over. So a lot of that involves basically getting to know what's in the jacket, because I have, possibly like up to 3/4 of a skeleton from like the right shoulder down to both hind legs and the tail. And I will tell you that is quite a thing to wrap your head around. You just have to spend a lot of time looking at it, and it was a little bit of time of just basically examining and wrapping my head around it before I could start doing a lot of prep and earns. The jacket is in a mudstone that is a little crumbly, and so it was found very close to the surface, obviously, and that means that it was already starting to feel the ravages of the bentonite clay expanding when it would get wet and shrinking when it would dry out. So, there's cracks all over the skeleton, and in places there can be half-centimeter gaps between parts of these limb shafts from diagenesis and from weathering. So the whole skeleton's sort of been worked apart, and it's real crumbly in places. And because it was a juvenile animal, the ends of the limb bones hadn't fully ossified. So, there was some bone in the joints, but they were still pretty cartilaginous. So when it comes to prepping around that bone and trying to get it away from the harder, more consolidated mudstone, you really be careful not to damage the ends of the caps, essentially, on either end of femur, tibia, or what have you, humerus. And so that has been a whole challenge in its own, and that's sort of every project is different and has its own challenges. And what I have learned on this one will help me for the next baby dinosaur I work on. But the next baby dinosaur I work on will not be the same as this baby dinosaur, and will have its own challenges as well. So that has definitely been my most challenging project to date, especially because it's partially articulated, and there's so many little bones and pieces, and the phalanges and the ongles have sort of like moved around the jacket. And so when I pulled the tibia away from the femur the other day, there's a phalange underneath it. So there's a finger and the knee. That is always, surprising. You never know what you're going to get. So you can never move forward thinking that, I just pulled this piece of rock away and it's no problem. Every fragment of matrix you move, could separate something, or you could have part of a bone in it. So you have to really take your time. I'm going to see if I can fix the light situation here. It's kind of dark, huh?
Yeah, it is.
For my eyes, there's plenty of light, but there's obviously not much light coming in from outside anymore. Let me turn on a couple lights here so I'm not dark.
Yeah. Not even.
Okay, so maybe now you can see things a little better.
Yeah,
I may still be kind of dark.
That's a tad better.
A little better?
Yeah.
Yeah, our apartment doesn't have very good light, but it's got a lot of natural light.
Okay, here. This was another question I just came up with. I was asking about if you think there's good enough evidence to justify the inclusion of lips on dinosaurs, be it herbivorous or theropod dinosaurs.
What What about dinosaur lips again?
Do
Sorry?
you think there's good enough evidence to justify the inclusion of such things in artwork of dinosaurs?
I do, yeah. I think the argument of looking at enamel tissue microstructure that's pretty hard to refute. And I honestly, that's the kind of work that needs to happen in paleontology. That people need to look at tissue structures. Dentin and enamel are tissues. Bone is a tissue. And you can say whatever you want about it after looking at how many, whatever the skull shape is, or if there are pits on the surface of the bone or not. But, that recent study, they looked at the enamel microstructure, and, basically, if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it flaps like a duck, well, what is it? So the comparison of the microstructure of the, dental tissues with extant taxa is a really, really good method. It's a really good study, and I don't think that there's any reason to say that that's not a reliable piece of evidence. So myself personally, I think that dinosaurs should have lips now.
Yeah.
But here's the great thing. Here's something that's different, I think, about paleo art and scientific art in general. Here's why it's scientific art. It's because the art itself is a hypothesis, right? It's done in conjunction with research. So anything published is a hypothesis, regardless of the conclusions, okay? If it's a new genus of dinosaur, that is a hypothesis. So artwork that depicts these animals or these conditions is a hypothesis, and that's one of the big things that separates scientific illustration and paleo art from other, just maybe art that is just more purely creative and abstract, portraits or whatever. So the point is that, the art itself is based on research. The artist has to have knowledge of anatomy and geology and all kinds of things, and so then they are then using their best basic knowledge of paleontology and biology, and in their minds they are synthesizing and weaving together a picture, and so then they express that picture digitally or traditionally with photos or models and sculpture, paintings, or what have you. So I think it's really cool. And that's, so people can say, oh, well, I don't think, dinosaurs had lips, or I don't think the studies, got anything interesting or worthwhile to say. But the art, is all part of that. So.
Yeah. There's another one here that's also been coming up a lot lately. It's about saber-toothed cats maybe having lip coverings covering their sabers. That's that debate that's recently got started recently.
Yeah. And I feel like I read about that about the time the dinosaur tooth study came out, but I might actually ask. My wife worked at the tar pits for like 8 years as a educationer. She was an educationer, and she did book learning and stuff. She was an educator and a tour guide, and so she might actually know. Hey, Ash. So the enamel on saber-toothed cat canines, what did they find out about that? You don't. Oh, well, she doesn't know either. It's the same enamel as the rest of the tooth, so it needed to be covered. Huh. Yeah. I mean, saber-toothed cat artwork is very, it's a classic-looking animal, and everyone loves seeing those big fangs hanging out. But I don't know. I can't speak one way or the other, really. I mean, I think some of the early restorations we've seen maybe were not intended to be fine finished art, and they were just sketches showing something. But they certainly look almost comical because it gives them these big round pusses.
Yeah, like a bulldog.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the evidence is not really in favor of them having, those kind of, jaw coverings. Personally, I think they may have had slightly larger lips than modern cats, but I don't think it would be a full-on covering like in a bulldog or a mastiff. This is something I've actually discussed with one of my artist friends out in California. Mauricio Anton has even talked about it on his blog, Chasing Sabertooths.
Yeah.
And I think he's in actually favor of saber-toothed cat teeth being well exposed, as he has always depicted them.
Well, that's the cool thing about paleo artists is they do their research too.
Yeah,
so they, more than just making something up in their head and drawing it, they're actually like looking into the literature.
Okay, Sam's allergies are really starting to get bad here, so he might have to drop out here. So he wanted to ask a question here about the dinosaur cloning.
Oh yeah, Sam, I'm right there with you, man. My allergies have been terrible this year. Really bad. What's your question?
Well, I don't get allergies that often, but when I do, they really drive me nuts. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Well, anyway, I wanted to ask you, if we're ever able to clone dinosaurs, would the study of them count as paleozoology, paleobiology? That's kind of a hypothetical question. I've always been curious about it.
Oh, would it count as paleozoology or paleobiology?
Yes, the study of living dinosaurs.
I guess it depends on how you go about it. So if we go down this rabbit hole, are you reverse engineering chickens into dinosaur-looking things, or are you retrieving intact genetic information from the original fossil and somehow magically almost finding a way to completely reconstruct a DNA sequence and a genome with minimal errors? And so assuming you can do that, okay, let's just say you can create a perfect Triceratops genome and then through trial and error hatch one out of an egg. I mean, you could probably do some biomechanical stuff. They're walking around, but everything the part of what makes a dinosaur is the fact that they lived in the Mesozoic, and they're extinct now, obviously, except for birds. So I think you'd have a hard time convincing people that you could study their behavior and pull anything useful out of that you could apply to the fossil record, because it would be hard to sort out, like, well, are you seeing a genuine, behavior resurrected from the dead, or is this just a product of it being artificially raised in a lab at a temperature affect the embryo and the neurons firing on all cylinders? And, there's so many what ifs. Be cool.
All right,
but I don't think so.
Okay.
All right.
That's a really good question, Sam. That's a good thinker.
Thank you. Well, so sorry to be hanging up now, but my allergies are really starting to get on my nerves now.
Yeah. Well, good luck dealing with those, and thanks for being on and for all your great questions.
You're very welcome. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, he'll be. Hopefully, you come back for this year's Dinofest, Sam.
I will. Yeah, and again, sorry to be walking out on you.
Yeah.
Guys, I mean, I don't get allergies often, but when I nuts.
Yeah, I've had seasonal allergies my whole life, and I've only just within the past decade and a half have I found a good medicine to combat these allergies.
All right.
Yeah, I've been fortunate not to have had to use the medication recently.
See you later, guys.
All right.
See you, Sam.
All right, see you later.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's just us two now.
Then there were two.
Well, when I did my first paleo artist interview with Christopher Cerca, it was actually just us two for the whole 2 hours that we talked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had a pretty.
Oh yeah, Cerca's art. Yeah, there's some of his art in that Hunting Dinosaurs book as well, I believe, that I liked. Or no, Dinosaurs: A Global View. It was a coffee table book that I might have might have borrowed from my high school for 17 years.
No, Rasurka, I first came in contact with him when I just found him on Facebook and just sent him a friend request. I thought he was some. I just, you just know how I am when I'm friending, paleo artists and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he and I have become pretty good friends on there. Very good friends.
Great, it's nice. Paleontologists and paleontology people are all very nice and fun to get to know.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just actually trying to think of another good paleontologist to have on the program here. And I've actually had a few names come up that I really want to get on here, but some of them are hard to get in contact with.
Yeah, especially researchers. Researchers are usually spending their evenings writing up new papers and manuscript editing and reviewing and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, some of the guys I'm trying to get on are, Professor Larry Whitmer, Phil Curry. Those are two guys. Dr. Whitmer is a guy that's been requested to me more than probably any other paleontologist recently.
Oh yeah, well the work he does is really, really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, Professor Whitmer.
That was, I remember when those, his CT scans started coming out and he started, looking into the sinuses and the vasculature and the neurology, endocasts and all those things. It was just wild. And, even his 3D prints that he does of, dinosaur brains and the associated structures, the inner ears and everything, super, super cool. Really, really cool.
Yeah, he's posted a video series recently that he had one of his grad students, Emily Caggiano, where they examined, the various parts of a Tyrannosaurus Rex skull in more detail. And one of the ones they did was Sue.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they actually took a trip to they went to Chicago to examine her actual skull. And that was actually pretty cool to see them examining the very skull that I got to see personally during my visit.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, Larry really does a lot of outreach through his lab, through their videos, and it's great, and he includes his students on it, and it's, and also the fact that, so we're dissecting with Emily, I think that's the series,
that sounds right.
Yeah, so, very prominently features a young woman working in paleontology, and that's wonderful because there are lots of little girls who love dinosaurs who are going to be able to see her and see a role model, and and it's great. So it's helping to improve representation of women in science.
Yeah, definitely agree, 100%.
Especially paleontology, right, where the archetypal image of a paleontologist is a dusty old guy with a beard and gray hair,
like Dr. Grant from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Yeah. The novel Dr. Grant actually did have a beard. The one in the movie was clean shaven.
Yeah, that's right.
Little fun fact there. Yeah, and Miss Caggiano was actually featured on Dinosaur George Blossing's podcast as one of his guests.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's interviewed he's interviewed quite a few paleontologists on his show.
Yeah, Dinosaur George has been around for a while, and he does that great educating. He has that traveling museum he takes around all over the South Texas, mostly, I think.
Yeah, they're on the Texas area. He's a very, very busy man. He's on the road constantly. He was our second guest we interviewed on the podcast.
He loves what he does too. It takes a lot of work to move all that equipment and the casts and to set it up, and then to talk about it, and to break it down, pack it up again, move it to the next place. He's very passionate. And it's great because there are so many kids who have now gotten to see dinosaur fossils that, otherwise may never have had the chance, not being able to go to a regional museum or to afford to go to a natural history museum. Yeah, it's really great. We do a lot of outreach at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, too. We actually have 2 distance learning studios, which are basically 2 video broadcast studios that the museum education department uses to teach classes on health and science and entomology, paleontology, geology, all kinds of stuff, to classrooms all over the United States and Canada. And last year, 2015, and I think 2016 as well, they taught a science or health class to at least one classroom in every state of the United States.
Wow, that's
So they are busy people.
wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Very, very cool indeed. And George is actually another person I would actually very much love to come to a club to Cleveland for a Dinofest one of these days.
Yeah, you could talk about, how he got started with his museum and, the work that he does. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting stories.
He's another person I would very much like to consider for a future speaker spot. Or if he could even bring his museum to Ohio. I don't know. That'd be pretty expensive though to bring his museum across the state line.
That is a long drive.
Yeah, he's mentioned that's why he's held himself back from traveling out of state because of the cost.
Yeah, you can't blame him.
Yeah, but he doesn't. Yeah, well, he could still come to the museum and talk about whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to have him on. Another guest of prominence we had after him was another artist named Joe DeVito. He's a guy who actually wrote an officially authorized sequel to the original 1933 King Kong with the blessing of the Marion C. Cooper estate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Marion C. Cooper was one of the founding fathers of King Kong alongside Ernest B. Schoedsack. Yeah, his family gave Joe the approval to create an illustrated graphic novel sequel prequel called Kong, King of Skull Island.
Cool.
It's a very, very good, very solid story.
Nice.
He was our first artist that we featured on the program back around December, about a month after we did George.
Mhm.
He's a great guy to have on. So if you wanted to ever have a King Kong talk at the museum, Joe would be your guy to go to.
My boss, Michael Ryan, loves the original King Kong. That's his Jurassic Park. So for him, it's the gold standard of all dinosaur movies, monster movies, pretty much King Kong. And he really loves King Kong. So I don't think it would take much to get him on board with having a King Kong something or other. I don't know if we could do it at the museum, but if you frame it right, we'd like to show the original King Kong sometime for our movie series, not MST3K style, but just in our general real science style, where we talk about sort of afterwards some of the things that people see in little trivia, and also the original Godzilla too. We'd like to do.
Okay, the original 1954 Godzilla.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm assuming it'll be the original Japanese version, Gojira.
Yeah.
That would make sense to do the original because the American version loses a lot of the original message of Gojira.
Well, yeah, they had to cut stuff out to insert Raymond Burr having a reaction, right?
Yeah,
he spent the whole movie reacting to something that's watching intensely.
Yeah, they changed it to make it more of a stereotypical American monster movie rather than being the serious, thoughtful, anti-war, anti-nuclear film that was originally intended by director Ishiro Honda in Gojira.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it would be much better to actually have to show the original Gojira.
I think it always is better to show the original. Yeah.
Because they're almost completely different movies.
You're right about that.
Yeah, that'd be perfect if you. Now, as for doing a Godzilla talk, I have a perfect guest in mind for that. The guy that I just interviewed back in March, Matt Frank.
Oh yeah, is he a big Godzilla fan?
He's a huge Godzilla fan. He's actually done official Godzilla work for IDW Comics.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
that's no joke.
Yep, no joke at all. He's been.
Yeah.
Yep, he did work on on Godzilla Rulers of Earth, Godzilla Legends, and Godzilla Rage Across Time, issue number 1.
I like the IDW series, especially if I can just plug Ghostbusters. I love what they've been doing with the Ghostbusters line lately. The artwork, the stories, the writing's all solid. So I have no doubt that the Godzilla series would be excellent too.
Yeah, some of the if you really want the good Godzilla stuff though, everything after the Kingdom of Monsters run, that's just pure gold.
Yeah.
Pure gold. Rules of Earth, it's a series I wholeheartedly recommend. It's been described as a series written by Godzilla fans for Godzilla fans.
Cool.
It's very good. You get a whole swath of... This is the first company that actually had the rights to other Toho Kaiju besides Godzilla.
Oh, so you get some of the other classic kaiju in there.
You know, King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, they're almost half the roster of Toho monsters are present in the IDW titles. You know, all 3 versions of Mechagodzilla, for example. Even monsters like, Titanosaurus, Varan, the Gargantuas, Zilla. Monsters that were very obscure, finally getting a second chance to shine. Whereas in movies, they kind of got put on the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
In the other times, 2 other comic series, from Dark Horse and Marvel, they did not have the rights to the other monsters because the licensing fees for the other kaiju was just as much as it was to get Godzilla's license. It was very expensive. This is hence why you don't see King Ghidorah and so forth in the Marvel or Dark Horse comics for Godzilla.
Oh, okay.
And that's why they created their own monsters instead. And in the case of Marvel, Godzilla crossed paths with many of Marvel's heroes, like the Fantastic Four and Avengers, among others. So if you ever wanted to do a Godzilla talk, Matt Frank would be a perfect guy to have on, as both an artist and a Godzilla fan, to talk about it.
Oh, it sounds like a really cool guy.
Yeah, he's a very nice guy. Nice guy. I'll be meeting him in person at this year's G-Fest in the Artist Alley. So yeah, if you're a big Godzilla fan, you've got some time to head on to Chicago. It's the second weekend of every July.
So I'll be going to the field then, unfortunately.
Yeah, right.
Back out to Alberta.
Yep. Yeah, and isn't Dr. Ryan supposed to be going to like Mongolia sometime soon?
Yep, he'll be going to Mongolia as part of a sort of a field course with Case Western Reserve University.
Oh.
And there'll be several students, and I'm actually going to be going with him, and I'm just going to be helping to facilitate the course. Just doing what I need to do. Basically, I guess I'll just be like a TA sort of.
Well, that's going to be something. This will be your first time leaving the United States, leaving North America as a whole, won't it?
No, I've been out of North America before. I've been to Europe. But this is the first time I'm going for paleontology, which is really cool. Super exciting.
Yeah, it
hasn't quite sunk in yet either.
Yeah, I should have rephrased that saying this is your first time in professionally going to another continent, to another country as part of a dinosaur hunt.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Now, okay, I wanted to discuss a little bit about the paleontology of the state of Ohio as a whole, because I don't think that really gets discussed enough.
Yeah, Ohio's got a very interesting geologic history, and it's got a pretty solid Paleozoic record, even getting into the Permian. So you can find Dimetrodon bones and Edaphosaur bones in Ohio, which might surprise a lot of people. But after that, there's nothing. So there's no Mesozoic, and there's no Paleogene or Cenozoic. You're pretty much nothing until you get to maybe a little Pliocene, but Pleistocene and Holocene. And Ohio, for most of Earth's history, was kind of underwater. So we have, massive stacks of shales and limestones and dolomites and sandstones. And it wasn't really until you got towards the end of the Paleozoic that more terrestrial environments came into the being here. But it's great because we have, everything in evolution seems to be going on in the ocean, for the first part of the Paleozoic, and then obviously then the Devonian vertebrates crawled out onto the land, and so on and so forth. So we have a really interesting snapshot. And again, Northeast Ohio, in the Cleveland area in particular, has that great slice in time where you just find a bunch of Dunkleosteus and other arthrodires, and the sharks, like the Cladosalaki and some of the Tenocanth sharks. So, sharks that aren't really quite like modern sharks, but I mean, they're sharks, but they have almost like Muppet mouths, so the jaws are out of the front of the face instead of just under a prominent nose. They have a very rounded snout, and their pectoral fins are very, very wide and triangular, and they have spines incorporated to the dorsal fin. And so Cladosalaki had more short hook-like spines, but some of the Tenocanth sharks, like Tenocanthus, had spines that were almost a foot long, big, serious spikes. And, the sharks get pretty big, too. Some of the shark jaws that we have in our collections, because we have preserved shark jaws, are fairly large and would be almost a meter across. So easily great white shark-sized.
Wow.
So there were really big sharks swimming around when you had Dunkleosteus and company swimming around, too. So the ocean was just full of diversity, and we have a great representation of that early oceanic diversity, in our museum's collections. And so not only do we have Dunkleosteus and arthrodires, but our shark collection is truly special because we essentially have shark mummies. And we have about 100 specimens of these sharks. There's something about the taphonomy of the Cleveland Shale. It's like a conservat Lagerstadt, and you get complete shark bodies preserved with the cartilaginous elements intact and often in 3 dimensions, the skin, muscle tissue, stomach contents, organ films. It's really, really something, and many of these sharks just look like they laid down and were buried, and that's it. That's how they appear. So you can see all these wonderful details, and I really think that you could learn something and probably see some really interesting stuff if you started testing different kinds of, fluorescence, try to get things to fluoresce. Like I know that there was a great inornithine paper, with laser fluorescence. They did laser stimulated fluorescence, and just a bunch of wonderful soft tissue features came to light in this lab that you couldn't see before. And then that you could do something like that with, I think, our sharks in the Cleveland Shale, and probably see quite a bit more too. They haven't been looked at very in depth recently. And as far as my research has been able to determine, they are the oldest complete shark fossils known. There are older partial sharks and fossils of sharks that involve, bits of like dermal denticles. Some of the oldest shark fossil remains are like dermal denticle patches or teeth. And a lot of times still, all you'll find of a shark is a tooth or a set of jaws, maybe a few ossified vertebrae. But in this case, we have the whole animal just laying there. And it's quite a privilege to be able to see those every day going into work. I nerd out about it a lot.
Yeah, Cleveland really sounds special if it has that many well-preserved shark fossils.
Yeah, I mean, because there's not many places on Earth where you can go and find fossils of that particular age. And, if you're looking for a fossil of a dinosaur, you can find a dinosaur all over the western United States, western North America, basically. They're everywhere. But if you want to find arthrodires or sharks from that age, there's not a lot of places that you can go, And so we're really fortunate to have that slice of time preserved. It's a lot easier to find a dinosaur than a Dunkleosteus. If you want to find a Dunkleosteus, you've got to come here to Cleveland and start looking around the Rocky River Valley, or you can go to Morocco and find them there too. The rest of the localities are maybe like an isolated mountain peak in California, or I know there's some places in Western Europe, Poland, whatnot, that have arthrodire specimens. You can find, more generally just arthrodires in places on the old red sandstone continent in Scotland, and obviously the Go-Go Formation in Australia. But you won't find no Glostius down there. It's a different environment, a slightly different time. But I love how Australians say the Go-Go Formation or the Go-Go fish. Because they say Gai. It's the Gai fish. Oh yeah, we had some researchers visiting from Australia. When she said, "Oh yes, the Gai Formation," that's hilarious. It's fun to say it that way. The Gai fish.
Yeah.
Glostius. That's a Glostius.
I actually have a good friend who lives down in Australia that might say it that way if you were ever to visit the area.
Yeah.
So, cool. Okay, now on further Ohio paleontology, what all the different types of prehistoric mammals have been found throughout the state of Ohio?
It's a good question. In our collections, we have, some things that might surprise you. We have Sirenians. So there are some, I think, remnants of Pliocene Sirenians. So something like a manatee. We have some bones from Ohio Sirenians in our collection, and we have peccaries, Pleistocene peccaries from Northeast Ohio. Obviously, we have mammoth and mastodon, and Ohio also has cave bears and giant ground sloths. I believe Megalonyx jeffersoni is the genus and species. Irish elk. So there are a pretty good. What is it? Is it Paleocastor, the giant beaver?
Might be called Castaroides. Possibly.
No, it's Castaroides. You're right. No, Paleocastor was the devil's corkscrew in western Nebraska plains. Castaroides is the giant beaver.
Giant beaver.
And then, yeah. So yeah, those are the generally the common Pleistocene mammals that we have from Ohio.
Yeah.
I don't know about things like direwolves or saber-toothed cats, though.
I wouldn't put out of the question, though, that there were saber-toothed cats probably around here. I know Ohio definitely had cougars.
Yeah.
The cougars and jaguars were definitely both present in this area, because Indiana, at the State Museum down in Indianapolis, I saw fossils of American jaguars on display there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another cat predator that would have been found in this part of the United States especially.
Yes.
And I don't doubt for a second that an American lion may have also lived in the area, possibly.
Yeah, and also, so the equids, fossil horses. I forget what the genus before equids was, but we can ask my friend Eric Scott that. Eric Scott is a guy you should have on your show sometime.
Oh, Eric Scott.
He's a paleontologist. Eric Scott, do you know Eric Scott?
I'm not sure.
Okay, he's a horse paleontologist down in he's in Orange County, California now.
Oh.
He was the assistant curator of geological sciences, I think, or at the San Bernardino County Museum. But anyway, he is his specialty is horse evolution. And it's amazing because he will make horses your favorite fossils because he's such a good communicator, and his research is actually really cool. He looks a lot at the teeth and the enamel cups and the incisors of horses, different kinds. So I'd put him on your list of people to contact. He's a very nice guy.
Yeah, he's
a super big nerd too.
I'll definitely have to consider Dr. Scott as a person to discuss horse evolution with.
Yeah.
And another surprising animal that's been found here, they've actually also found tapirs here in Ohio, surprisingly.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I only found that out because there was an artist that did a depiction of prehistoric animals in Ohio, and he actually included a tapir in there. He mentioned that they've actually been found in our state.
Cool. Oh, yeah. Well, if it weren't for those pesky glaciers wiping out, 240 million years of time, plus just erosion too is part of it.
Yeah. It was.
And all the invertebrates, we can't forget.
Yeah, of course.
Most of the Ohio fossil record consists of a wonderful invertebrate fossil record.
Our state fossils, a trilobite.
Yeah, Isotulus.
Yeah, it's one of the largest ones, if I'm not mistaken. I actually have
I'm biased.
I've
As
got.
a vertebrate worker, I feel like it should be Dunkleosteus.
Yeah, the dunk should have been the state fossil.
Yeah. Maybe we can start a petition and change it.
Yeah, the dunk should have been the state fossil.
Yeah. It's definitely the official fossil of Northeast Ohio, Cleveland. Unofficially, the official. There you go.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Dunk should have been our state fossil. I mean, I know the giant shark megalodon, I think, is the state fossil in at least one or two states down in the south.
Like, what, North Carolina, South Carolina, or Florida or something?
I think it's possibly in one of those states, because meg teeth have been found all up and down the southeastern United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've actually got some in my collection.
Oh, yeah. Well, they seem to be pretty common, huh?
Yeah, the thing that kickers, the really big, intact, large teeth, they are not cheap. Not cheap, not necessarily.
I'll never forget, back in my mitigation days, we were monitoring a project downtown Los Angeles. It was called the 6th and Bixel Project because it was in the corner of 6th and Bixel Streets. So it was right in the heart of downtown. So the excavators were digging a foundation for a new building that was going to go up there. So they had to go down, 30 or 40 feet in some places beneath street level, and they came across part of a whale fall. And it was a Pliocene whale fall, so like 3 million years old. And so as we moved in, we started to excavate around the skeleton. What we had, and it was actually a relief. It was it was a rib cage, part of a rib cage of a whale, but the rib bones were just out of this big around. They were 4 inches across, huge straps of rib bone from this whale. And the area around it was just littered with shark teeth. I mean, we found hundreds of shark teeth on this project, and then around the whale skeleton, we found a megalodon tooth in situ, and it was freaking awesome because, of all places, downtown Los Angeles, a couple miles from Hollywood, you've got these massive skyscrapers around you, the same buildings that were blown up in Independence Day, and you're digging up a whale fossil and megalodon teeth and great white shark teeth and mako teeth. It was really cool. That was probably the best thing about doing mitigation paleontology, was getting to go and look for fossils in places you would never get to do it otherwise. Like the last time somebody was able to do paleontology in downtown Los Angeles was like early 1900s when they were tunneling out, roadways. Maybe in the 70s, so when mitigation really got its start in Southern California. So it's so rare to be able to see the intact strata beneath a modern American metropolis. That was awesome. I also got to go out into the deserts, Mojave Desert, and play around in Pleistocene dry lake beds, playa lake beds, lakes that had once been 100 square miles, before glaciers retreated and the jet stream swung up north. And 20 feet beneath sand dunes, you have an intact, fossilized lacustrine ecosystem with anodonta, clams, as big as your hand. We got to carbon date those clams, and they were, 38,000 years old. I mean, I got to carbon date fossils. How freaking cool is that?
Not every day you would get to do that.
Hasn't thought of carbon dating when thinking of fossils as a kid.
With most fossils, you have to use other methods.
Because,
dating.
when it comes to paleontology and dinosaurs, you can't directly date dinosaur bones. Right. You date the stratum or the strata around the fossils. But this, we actually got to take samples of, 2 of our lowest occurring samples stratigraphically, 20 feet beneath the modern lake surface. And those turned out to be 38,000 years old. It was so cool, especially because a lot of research has been done on dry lake beds in the Mojave Desert, because these lakes all didn't exist necessarily at the same time. The Mojave River in the desert flowed north towards Las Vegas, and at different times it emptied into different basins. And then tectonic activity in the desert along the Garlock and the San Andreas Fault basically shifted the different blocks under the desert, causing the land surface to rise, and eventually they would cut off those lakes from the river flow, and so then they would just shrink and dry up, and the lake would empty into a basin further upstream, and basically it would just switch off between basins until it made it to its modern terminus up near Baker. So the kind of evidence they had for the fauna and this stratigraphy of the lake that I was working in, which was the same region in the movie in Aaron Brockovich. There's a town in the movie Aaron Brockovich in California, and the heck is the name of that town? I'm going to look it up on my phone. I'll just look at Google Maps real quick. But there's a point to all this rambling on I'm doing.
Yeah, the corporation that's contaminating the water supply or something like that.
Yeah. So there's hexachromium 6 fluoride or something that's in the water supply in this whole town. And if you go up, here we are, Victorville. You go to Barstow. Okay, Hinckley is the town's name. So I was actually working just a few miles north of the town of Hinckley, and this old lake bed, Harper Lake, that's right, Harper Lake, and so the solar project was built right in the southwestern edge of the modern Harper Lake Basin, which had once been 100 square miles. So the only research that had been done on Harper Lake essentially was on the old paleo shores that existed in the highlands around where the modern lake basin is, and fossils found in those old lake stands. So basically all the stratigraphy was from the modern lake surface up to whatever paleo elevation when the lake was 100 square miles. And there hadn't been any work done on the subsurface. So this solar project came along, and these machines would unearth, and they'd dig these massive hundreds of feet wide trenches that were 20 feet deep. So that's a good, 6 or 7 meters of stratum that had never been looked at before. And you don't get to just go into a lake in a desert and dig down 20 feet and expose thousands of feet of stratigraphy on, continually. So that's why it was so cool, because these machines did all the work for us. And, the keen-eyed paleontologist or stratigrapher gets to go in and check it out, and that was awesome. So I think if you're a paleontologist at heart, regardless of what your profession is, you can find something fascinating in any fossil, whether it's anything, plants. They all have something really cool to say.
That's pretty true. Every fossil has a little story to tell. It's just up to the right person to figure out what that story is.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you another one of my really neat memories from doing mitigation paleontology. I was up by Bakersfield. There's a famous fossil site north of Bakersfield called Shark Tooth Hill, and it's Miocene, and it's around near Tembler Mountain in a big sequence of sand. And I was monitoring, so I was watching them grade out a hill in an oil field. So they were getting ready to level out a new pad so they could set up a drill and set up a new oil well. And I was walking the perimeter around this hill. You're hundreds of feet above the river valley. You can see the Kern River to the south of you off in the haze in the distance. And you're surrounded by these rolling, steeply sided hills covered in, short brown grasses. So one day I was walking a loop around the side of where this well pad is going to be constructed, and there I looked down on a clump of dirt sitting in the grass was a megalodon tooth. And it was only about 2 inches long, but it was It was razor sharp, and it was actually white because the sun had bleached it. But otherwise, it was in immaculate condition, perfect. So I plucked it out of the grass, and I looked around, and think that there's this massive shark tooth sitting up in the grassy hills of Southern California near Bakersfield, and then I walked a little further around the side of the hill, and there was a cetacean caudal vertebra, a whalebone. He just doesn't get much more of a weird juxtaposition than that. A whalebone up in these semi-dry, semi-arid foothills, hundreds of miles from the ocean. So it's pretty neat, pretty excellent.
Yeah, that reminds me of a little something I saw on Shark Week not too long ago, where they found a prehistoric baleen whale skeleton that was almost completely intact except for the head. It was missing its head. They did some forensic work, and they came to the conclusion that it was actually decapitated by a megalodon of a considerable size.
Oh, did they find like bite marks on it or something?
Something. They might have found something like that. This was on a Shark Week episode.
Shark Week.
It was from a few years back.
The thing is, like, I would love to see, because I know we find lots of fossils of things that have shark's teeth and bite marks. Even Dunkleosteus fossils have sharks scavenging bite marks on them. But you really got to go pretty far to say, like, oh, megalodon. Like, you better have megalodon tooth parts stuck in scour marks in the cervical vertebrae or something. Because skulls fall out of whale heads. If you study taphonomy, when animals rot, especially something like a whale, and all that skin gets real soft and juicy, the connective tissue bonds sort of fail, and the jaw bones will just slough out. Just like, kind of like a banana out of a rotten skin will just, out they'll go. So you can just basically drip your skull bones out as you float and bloat on the ocean surface. And so that will often cause the skull to end up in a completely different condition or position than the rest of the body. So, taphonomy is probably my favorite part of paleontology, reconstructing, how fossils ended up looking the way they did, what happened to them, it's cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
I can never forgive the Discovery Channel for what they did with Megalodon and the mermaids and all that.
Yes. They got a lot of flack for this.
Yeah, good, because that was some of the most terrible garbage I've ever seen on television. It's intentionally misleading, and it really is. They say that they're not trying to mislead people because they put a disclaimer out there, but that's just trash, and shame on the Discovery Channel for that, because people still come in and say, oh, well, Megalodon's real. It's still alive because I saw it on TV. That was completely irresponsible of them.
Yes,
completely irresponsible.
Very deceptive. And all the so-called scientists on that show were not actually actors. Yeah. And, actors have to act, and I'm sure they were happy to get the parts. The real problem is the decisions made by the production companies, the production executives. It's just a cheap ratings grab, and it's pretty much a permanent blemish on their record. Okay, I think I narrowed it down. The episode of that Shark Week that they had this feature, and the episode was called Sharkzilla. Where they reconstructed a full-size 52-foot megalodon mechanically. I think that may have been. I think that's probably the one, because it was something I purchased and watched on Amazon Prime.
When is Shark Week?
Shark Week. I think it's usually around August is when it usually airs.
Okay.
It's a summertime show usually. Summertime. I only got really involved watching it, many decades ago when Nigel Marvin was hosting it. And that's when Shark Week was still a very good series of programs.
Nigel Marvin's Wild World.
Yeah,
I love Nigel Marvin's like Prehistoric Park and when like the world's or prehistory's most dangerous oceans, whatever it was.
Yeah, yep. That whole series where he travels to the most dangerous prehistoric oceans.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun watching those.
Those were actually not totally off base there, except for the one where they still had the exaggerated giant pliosaurs. There's still some people thinking that, certain pliosaurs were really genuinely as big as they were featured in Walking with Dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, because Leupleurodon was not as big as they show it in Walking with Dinosaurs. At least the skeletons that I'm aware of. Yeah. I'm not a marine reptile expert, but I know that these skeletons that I've seen are maybe like 5 or 6 meters long.
Yeah, about 20 feet, probably up 20 feet at most.
Yeah.
That's the size of a small...
Cool, still scary.
Yeah, and Kronosaurus was once thought to be like 43 feet long. There was that old famous reconstruction at Harvard of a 12-plus meter long Kronosaur. Then that was re-examined, and they actually added too much vertebra or something like that, so they then had to downsize it to a more accurate, like 33 feet for the species.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's still giant pliosaurs out there, even if it's not what we used to think.
Yeah, there are genuine big ones. Members of the Pliosaurus genus. Those were the ones that could truly become, 15, 14 meters and 12 meters, 14 meters. But not blue whale-sized super predators, though. That's complete fiction.
I think a 25-foot long lizard monster is enough. 25 feet is that's big, especially considering they didn't hardly have tails, and that's just mostly, a head and paddles.
Yeah, head and paddles, basically a killer penguin on roids. Yeah, I'm actually friends with an author named by the name of Max Hawthorne, who's written the Kronos Rising novel series, where he's got a fictitious species of evolved Kronosaurus that actually is a real giant of a predator. They're 75 plus feet long, maybe larger. That's basically taking up the role of the shark from Jaws and terrorizing coastal towns and whatnot.
I'm sure it's a movie waiting to happen.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, speaking of movies like that, Steve Alton, the author of the Meg series, there's a movie adaptation now finally coming out next year.
Yeah, with Jason Statham.
Yeah, Jason Statham as Jonas Taylor. Yep.
That's funny.
Yeah, that movie.
We'll see how it is.
That film has had a 20-plus year development history. Bouncing around from studio to studio, and almost getting something off the ground, but nothing quite happened. But once Jurassic World came out and was successful, that opened the floodgates for more paleofiction on screen.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about Jurassic World is a far cry from what Jurassic Park was originally intending to do. However, it made over $1 billion worldwide. So it just goes to show you that dinosaurs continue to be very popular.
It's the age of dinosaurs, age of dinosaurs and kaiju in the box office in the years to come.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm okay with that.
Even though you have to wait a few years, though, till the next Godzilla sequels.
Yeah.
American ones, that is. So that kind of brings me to this question I just came up here. If you could come up with your own storyline for a dinosaur movie or a dinosaur novel, what kind of plot line would you have, and what kind of plot device would you use to explain the presence of not even dinosaurs in modern times?
I remember when I was in college, my roommate, who has gone on to success as a paleontologist. One day, I think in the throes of a finals week, we spent a couple of hours pacing around our apartment, working out the sequel for Jurassic Park. This is long before Jurassic World. And our story was that we worked out that, Dodson from the original film, Dodson, we got Dodson here. He's the guy with Biosyn.
Yeah, he was the lead guy for Biosyn.
Yeah, we worked out that the amber thing fell through, but Biosyn had figured out, or stolen the technologies to figure out how to obtain genetic material from soft tissue, because now dinosaur soft tissue is a thing. So he would actually pay people to go steal fossils from Alan Grant's excavations, and then back in the Biosyn labs, they would combine the genetic material after extracting it from the soft tissue with bird DNA or rat-type DNA instead of frog or salamander DNA. And then that allowed them to open up a whole new kind of, appearance for the dinosaurs that was more scientifically accurate for modern understandings, and also a whole host of other fossil taxa, because the whole amber and mosquitoes and DNA thing, it's really difficult. How do you know your mosquito bit a T-Rex or Velociraptor? But if you just dig up soft tissue bearing bone from a T-Rex site or a whatever, Metriacanthosaur or a Kronosaur, it's way easier to explain that. So using that sampling method combined with modern understanding of phylogenetics, you could make all kinds of cool prehistoric animals. So I think we had some kind of a story where Grant's trying to figure out who's stealing his fossils, and then Ian Malcolm's in there. And I think we, in true college boy fashion, we thought, maybe Scarlett Johansson could play marine biologist who's discovering that, these whale carcasses an Apache's been following have been all bitten and, ripped up by like a giant pliosaur or something. They find a giant, like a pliosaur tooth embedded in one of the carcasses. And then, I don't know, I think it kind of fell apart from there. But it was really interesting because in Jurassic World, there's some exposition by Henry Wu's character, and he talks about how they use soft tissue now. So I feel like they overheard us, or maybe great minds think alike or something.
Yeah, it basically means that they could have actually gone for more realistic dinosaurs, but they didn't want to do that in the film context. They wanted to stick with the monster aspect of things still.
Yeah, and that was disappointing because they weren't that great looking. The dinosaurs in that movie, they didn't even look as good as the original Jurassic Park.
Yeah, not as good as in the Part 1 or Part 2.
Right.
Yes, The Lost World still used the same approach as the first film with animatronic and CGI dinosaurs in tandem.
Yeah.
And that film still holds up very well. And of course, Jurassic Park 3 even still used animatronics and CGI in tandem to good effect.
Yeah. Jurassic Park 3 looked good too. I always have to plug this because this is the one, my sort of not really 15 minutes of fame, is that there is footage of me as a 17-year-old kid digging up a T-Rex on the Jurassic Park 3 special features. So it's just like a 8 or 10 minute long little mini documentary that's part of the special features, and it's mostly Jack Horner talking about the Hell Creek Project, but there's me and my friends and a lot of my friends who were out there at the time. This basically has footage of them digging up fossils, and I'm wearing like all khaki because that's what I thought paleontologists wore, like olive drab khaki everything. So it's funny for me to go back and see myself as this young kid.
I'm gonna have to look for that. I'm gonna have to look for that if I rewatch the movie.
Oh yeah, look for it. You'll see it. Jurassic Park 3, actually, it was really interesting because I got to work with Joe Johnston, the director, because he became friends with Jack Horner, and he really liked coming out and looking around for fossils in the Badlands while we were out there digging. So he'd show up in his van, and it would be kind of fun to have Joe Johnston around, because he was a very nice man, and he was always just very quiet-natured, but just a really, really nice guy who was just a regular kind of dude. He brought his kids out a couple times, and we had a lot of fun. One day, I remember, Joe was out in the field area where I was working on a Triceratops skeleton, and he came walking up around 11:30 in the morning, and he says, I found a Triceratops. And me thinking, oh, this guy's not a paleontologist. We'll see. I don't know if he really knows what he's talking about, because he's saying, yeah, it looks like it's laying on its dorsal surface, and so I've got the back of the brain case exposed, and I've got the frill there too, but I don't know how much of the rest of the skull is intact. And I thought, okay, well, I'll go give him an expert opinion. I was probably like 23 or 4 at the time, and thought very highly of myself. So I go walking out a quarter mile through the Badlands across the prairie, and Joe takes us to this little mound that's only, I don't know, it's only a few meters up off the prairie, and it's just this little knob of mudstone and sandstone. And sure enough, at the top of it was exactly what he had said, and it was an upside-down Triceratops, beautiful frill, brain case is all intact, tooth rows missing, lower jaws missing, but it looked like like all the horns were there, the top of the face was there. So we called it Joe's Trike and spent the rest of the summer digging up this beautiful Triceratops skull that he found. And the real gift for me was learning a lesson not to, project on people like that. Obviously to know that I was not the world's only dinosaur expert. Joe Johnson is a smart man. Never underestimate people.
That's right. Yeah, I just had now more on the pop culture side. If you could come up with a design for Godzilla, what kind of design would you come up for your own take on Godzilla? If you had to go with more something that's actually plausible, if he could actually exist as a real creature, because under the normal rules of physics, and if Godzilla was as he is in the movies, he would collapse under his own weight, for example. Right. How would you go about making Godzilla something that could potentially exist?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you could make a Godzilla more than, 20 feet tall and 100 feet long. You could certainly give it a long tail, but, it would look like a big bipedal sort of Stegorexosaurus kind of thing. I have to say that if I could have my input onto the, design got like full kaiju Godzilla, the eyes have always I've always wondered why Godzilla's eyes look like a couple of ping pong balls, with like a pupil sharpened in on them. I know that's part of the classic character design, but I really like the idea of giving it a more like an intelligent reptilian eye. And this last Shin Godzilla that came out, Shin Gojira, was really cool. Really, it was an excellent design, but still it had like the pure white eyeball. And to me, it's like, well, I would like to see them make it look actually like an organic eye, because it still just kind of looked like this white ball with a dot drawn on it. But that's really like, Godzilla is so iconic, I don't know how else you could mess with it. You can make it scaly. The Godzilla from, was it 98?
The 1998 film was a mutant iguana, and that was trying to make it more accurate, but without being anywhere getting anything else right.
And that's where I feel like it was just taken too far, because some of the aspects of that design were neat. The reptilian textures of the skin and stuff, but the fact that they basically turned it into a weird big,
a coward that ran away from the military.
Well, that instance is just, and they're like, well, it's just an animal trying to exist, and that's cool. But...
Well, Godzilla is a kaiju, not just a mere animal. That's what separates him from characters like King Kong and so forth. Kaiju have distinctive...
Yeah, all good points.
Kaiju have very distinctive character traits that make them different than just regular giant animals.
Yeah, well, obviously, Godzilla is intelligent.
Yes, right? An intelligence that's beyond just mere instinct. A purpose.
Yes.
Special powers.
So the 98 American film has an internal consistency, sometimes with its own logic, but overall, I think it was it's, well, it is what it is.
Yeah, but their king is, though, that actually could have been a lot better if they had stuck with its original script. The original script was actually a lot more faithful to the original Toho Godzilla films. Much, much more faithful. But anyhow, the Americans got it right with this Godzilla design, though. Something that looks more like the classic design, but still being updated and, well, plausible.
Yeah, well, I like that, and I really liked the last Godzilla film that came out, the American.
2014 Godzilla.
Godzilla. I think that did a lot of stuff right. Yeah, I enjoyed that film.
Yeah, they gave him, he has an atomic breath, he battles other kaiju, he can't be harmed by the military. They got it very much right. So much so that he's getting 2 sequels.
It's great, yeah, and I really like the King Kong movie.
Yeah, Kong Skull Island, that movie was freaking awesome, especially if you caught the post-credit scene.
Yep, oh yeah, definitely caught that. That was great.
Yeah, setting up the introduction of the iconic trio of monsters, King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan.
Yeah.
This will be their first time that other Toho Kaiju have been adapted into an American monster movie, into an American Godzilla film.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
It'll be very interesting to see what design they come up with for King Ghidorah, because I have seen a lot of very cool fan conceptions of what the legendary King Ghidorah and Rodan and Mothra might look like. So it's going to be fun to see which artist that I seen a depiction of Ghidorah got it right. I mean, just basically for Ghidorah, it's got 3 heads, golden color, gravity beams, and towers over Godzilla. It has to be defeated in a team fight. Yeah, I think what else here. Yeah. Anywho here. Hey, if you actually could if you could come up with your own story for a Godzilla film, what kind of story would you have in mind if you had the ability to write and direct your own Godzilla film?
I like the concept of like a monster island and sort of a wild jungle mountain terrain that's mysterious with without the cities and the people trying to run away, because cities have been destroyed so much, and going out and just having some imaginary jungle island or lost continent with all these gigantic monsters fighting, where you can just sort of just forget about whatever physics are, just have fun and just have inventive monsters and giant dinosaurs and things. I really like those ideas, and so the fact, like, if Godzilla is the king of all monsters, maybe he sees challengers arrive sometimes, and so something new comes out of the earth, from deep within the earth, and he's got to fight off this powerful monster. I know that things like that have sort of been done before, but I think those are just fun stories because it's more about the personality of, the kaiju. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think they should have a story that's more or less focused, a story that's told from the perspective of the monsters. Because there have been some times where Godzilla has been given a chance to be explored in a lot more detail. I mean, this creature's not just a mere dumb brute. This is a thinking creature.
Mm-hmm.
In some instances, he actually is as intelligent as human beings. In some instances, more instinctive than others. So it'll be interesting to see what Godzilla's thoughts are on. I mean, I don't want to go too anthropomorphic, but at the same time, though, there needs to be something. I think the best representation of Godzilla personality-wise would be the Heisei series from the 90s. As a force of nature type character, that he defends the Earth, but he does not exactly defend humans, defend humanity.
Yeah.
That's the version of Godzilla that I like the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he does team up with he does have allies among other monsters, but at the same time, though, human gets killed, it's like, whatever, But he still has the capacity, to form possible friendships with certain humans, possibly. Like that one psychic girl in the 90s series, Miki Sagusa.
Mm-hmm.
She was the only person I would say could be considered his friend, for lack of a better word. Okay, now I had another question about regarding
great.
the... Cleveland Museum here. It's about Dinofest, about the whole process of Dinofest, like how it works. I never really got much information about how you guys go about selecting your speakers and so forth for Dinofest.
Well, the final call basically comes down to Michael and the education division. So Michael will solicit myself and Amanda McGee, the collections manager, for ideas like who should we bring in this year? Are there any themes that we can sort of touch on, or researchers that work on some things? And we try to keep DinoFest diverse, and we want to have a good representation of men and women and different races. So it's a lot of brainstorming, and then usually just hit on, we haven't had this person yet, and then that's how things start going. We always have an artist, and then the other speakers just depend. They sort of come out of that brainstorming, and so we have these meetings early in the year, the spring. So we're having the 2017 DinoFest meetings now, and that's when we start to work out the budget and the other events, the speakers who are going to be there, that kind of thing. And with the education division, because they have to set up a lot of the activities for families and so on and so forth. So it's just like any other sort of event. You just have to have a few meetings and brainstorm and discuss, and then you reach out to the speakers and say, hey, are you available at this time frame to come and talk? And so it all basically rolls out from there.
A lot simpler than I thought it would be.
Well, I'm simplifying it because I don't, have to do all the work that the education people have to do, like booking the tickets and the rooms, and, or setting up a lot of the activities. Although a lot of my work the day of involves moving things around and we set up tables with fossils and activities and take part in all that too. So it's a long day for us.
Yeah, I bet. And is price ever a consideration for potential guests?
We offer usually a stipend for visitors, so we'll cover their travel and like room and board. And so then you make sure that they have money so they can, have food and all of that, and take care of their meals and things. Mm-hmm. So I know some paleontology speakers do charge a bit of money, but we don't have a budget that allows us to bring in some people, just because it could be quite a bit if they choose to charge that fee. Not everyone does. A lot of times they'll visit or extend the courtesy of their time for another museum, for colleagues or something. It helps to know people.
Yeah, I don't think you'd have a problem getting Dr. Holtz on the. I don't think you'd have an issue getting Dr. Holtz on the guest list.
We'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, Dr. Holtz has he's admitted interest to me in coming to Dinofest, so he's actually interested in possibly doing so.
Well, I can forward that on to the powers that be and see what happens.
Yeah, but I'll let Dr. Holtz know that your guys are potentially considering him. You'd much appreciate it.
You can let him know that we'll remember for 2018. Yeah. We'll think of him when the time comes.
Yeah, if he doesn't get chosen for this year.
Well, I think we're close to finalizing who we are interested in bringing out for this year already, but I'm not obliged to say that yet because it's not finalized. But we'll definitely keep him in our pool of candidates for a future Dinofest.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So when is it usually? When do you guys usually have the guest list finalized?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. It's usually sometime by maybe midsummer, but it just depends on circumstances too, year to year. It can vary.
And does this also tie into who you have to be your keynote speaker the day before the Dinofest activities begin?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember Dr. Correa, when he showed up, he actually stuck around to attend the Dinofest events. But Dr. Schweitzer, I think she left after her talk that day.
She was busy, yeah, she was busy. Yep, it just depends. Researchers, they've got busy lives.
So,
well, Greg, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to bow out. But I really appreciate you having me on your podcast, and it was a lot of fun talking to you and Sam and everyone.
yeah,
You guys have a great little group.
yeah.
So thank you for having me on.
It was a great pleasure, Lee, and maybe sometime in the future I'll ask Dr. Ryan to come on next.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, and also my collections manager colleague Amanda McGee. She's a Canadian paleontologist who specializes in turtles, so I can let them know that you might be interested in having him on.
Yeah, I'm definitely like to have try to get some more names of people, outside of the big names that I can look up on Wikipedia. Some lesser known people like you just mentioned.
Yeah, well, we can keep in touch via Facebook or email, and
Yep.
maybe throw some more ideas your way.
Yeah,
But
I'd much appreciate that.
sure thing. Well, thank you very much, sir. It's been fun talking fossils and kaiju, and look forward to seeing you at Dinofest again this year.
Yep, I'll be there, or I'll swear to God, a T-Rex is gonna stomp on me and eat me. Yeah, I'm not very worried about that last part. Well,
Hey, I think I lost your audio.
okay, my mic's
I don't know
back
if you can
in.
hear me, but I cannot hear you, sir.
That's okay. All right, my mic's on.
Looks like we've got some technical difficulties. I'm sorry, I cannot hear you.
Okay, how about now?
Oh, there's some audio.
All right, I had to unplug my microphone.
Oh, weird how that happens. Okay, well, anyway, yeah, look forward to seeing you at Dinofest, and thanks again.
Okay, you're very welcome, Lee, and you have yourself a good night.
You too. Yeah, take it easy, Greg. Later.
Alright. Okay, boys and girls, this is Prehistory A Traveler's Guide.